I was never the type to blow up over cake. I'm not petty like that. But when you've spent years keeping the peace, swallowing your pride, and bending backwards to be the bigger person, a moment like this, it sticks. My name's Cole. I'm 38. I work in real estate, mostly flipping mid-range homes and renting out duplexes on the side. I'm not flashy, never really been. My idea of a good weekend is grilling in the backyard with my son, throwing a football around, maybe catching a game with my neighbor, Rick. Just a regular guy. Nothing special. But that's the thing, right? When you're not loud, people think they can walk all over you. Especially family. My sister, Amber, is 2 years older than me. Growing up, she always had a flair for theatrics. Everything was a crisis or a performance. She wasn't evil, just exhausting. Our parents catered to her meltdowns like they were responding to natural disasters. I remember once, when we were kids, she screamed because I got the blue bowl she liked. She threw her cereal across the room and cried until Mom let her stay home from school. I got grounded. That kind of thing sticks with you, even when you laugh it off later. As adults, we were never close. We drifted, as most siblings do, but not for lack of proximity. We both stayed in town. I built a life here. Got married. Had a son, Max. He's 8 now. Amber had a kid too, Hunter, who's 6 and already acting like a carbon copy of her. Loud. Demanding. The kind of kid who doesn't hear no without a tantrum attached to it. The kind of kid you don't really want around your own kid, but you smile and nod and make the playdates anyway because it's family. Amber's been a single mom since Hunter was born. She's never talked about his dad, and I've never asked. We've never had the kind of relationship where I could dig into her personal life without it turning into a lecture. She always has something to prove. How hard she's working, how no one understands her struggle, how I could never know what it's like. I get it, single parenting is hard. I've offered help, quiet help, grocery cards, covering Hunter's school trip when she forgot, even letting them stay a few weeks in one of my rentals when her AC went out last summer. I don't parade it around. I just help. That's how I was raised. Or maybe it's just how I've decided to be, in spite of how we were raised. Anyway, the birthday. Max had been counting down to his birthday for weeks. We were finally having a proper party again after a couple quiet years. Backyard balloons, some of his school friends, a rented bounce house. Nothing crazy, but enough to make him feel like the center of the universe for a day. He picked out a dinosaur-themed cake, chocolate with green frosting, little edible rocks, and a T-Rex smashing through the side like it was coming out of Jurassic Park. We ordered it from a specialty baker across town. Cost me more than I want to admit. But Max's face when he saw it? Worth every penny. Amber arrived late, of course. She swept in like a storm 20 minutes after we started singing Happy Birthday, dragging Hunter by the hand while shouting something about parking nightmares. She didn't even say hi to me, just dropped her purse on the kitchen counter and made a beeline for the drinks. Hunter, meanwhile, made himself at home by grabbing a balloon sword from one of the other kids and immediately whacking a girl in the head with it. I was halfway across the yard, greeting one of Max's teachers, when I saw it happen. The girl started crying. Hunter laughed. Amber didn't even notice. I pulled him aside and gave him a soft but firm, "Hey, that's not okay, buddy." He stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. Amber saw the tail end of it and swooped over like a vulture. "Cole, seriously?" she said, flipping her sunglasses onto her head. "He's 6. Don't talk to him like he's some criminal." "I didn't," I said. "I just told him to be careful. He hit someone. He was playing. You've got a yard full of kids. What do you expect?" She turned to Hunter, smoothing his hair down like he was some victim of injustice. "You're okay, sweetie. Uncle Cole's just being dramatic." That right there. That tone. It wasn't new. I'd heard it all my life. The way she dismisses anything she doesn't like as overreaction, how she rewrites reality in real time to suit whatever story she's telling herself. I forced a smile and walked away. Max was already tugging at my sleeve to help with the piñata. His happiness was the only thing that mattered. The rest of the party went as you'd expect. A little chaos, a lot of sugar, kids screaming and laughing and spilling juice on the patio furniture. But I noticed something. Every time Hunter didn't get his way, something broke. When he didn't win a party game, he threw the plastic prize across the lawn. When another kid took the last cupcake before him, he stomped on a paper plate. And Amber? She was too busy scrolling through her phone or telling another mom about her insane boss to do a thing. I held my tongue. I always do. We made it to cake time. Max stood at the head of the table, beaming like it was Christmas and his birthday rolled into one. Everyone was singing. I lit the candles. He closed his eyes and made a wish. Right as he leaned forward to blow them out, Hunter surged forward, both arms out like a linebacker, and slammed his bare, frosting-loving hands, right into the cake. Hard, like he was digging for treasure. Green frosting flew. The T-Rex split down the middle. One of the candles toppled. For a moment, no one moved. Even the kids were stunned. And then Hunter shouted at the top of his lungs, "Now no one gets any," with this twisted little grin like he was proud of what he'd done. Max's face crumpled. He didn't cry, not right away. He just looked at me, confused, like he couldn't quite process what had happened. Like he was asking, silently, why? I looked at Amber. She blinked, surprised, then gave this weak laugh. Wow. Okay, that was dramatic, huh? She didn't apologize. She didn't scold him. She just walked over and said, "We'll clean it up," like that was the point. I didn't say a word. I picked up Max, who was now blinking hard, lips pressed tight, and carried him into the house. We sat on the couch in silence while the party slowly fizzled outside. People started leaving. Some awkwardly offered to help. I shook my head. That night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, I got a text from Amber. No apology. No explanation. Just, "You're overreacting. Don't bother coming around anymore if this is how you're gonna act." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "Cool. I'll unlist the house title tomorrow." I hit send. By morning, I had 38 missed calls lighting up my phone. And that's where things really started unraveling. I didn't answer the calls. Not the first 5, not the next 10. By the time the count hit 38, I had already put my phone on silent and taken Max out for pancakes at that old diner on 5th. He didn't say much, just quietly pushed his scrambled eggs around the plate while the waitress tried to cheer him up with extra whipped cream on his hot chocolate. I was angry, yeah, but more than that, I was tired. Tired of pretending Amber's behavior was normal. Tired of pretending her kid's chaos was just high energy. Tired of excusing years of entitlement and disrespect because she was family. Max finally looked up at me halfway through breakfast and asked, "Did I do something wrong?" And that cracked me wide open inside. "No, buddy," I said, putting down my fork. "You did everything right. Some people just don't know how to be kind." He nodded like he understood, but he was 8. He shouldn't have to. By noon, Amber had moved on from phone calls to texts. The first few were the same tone as the night before. "You're seriously blowing this out of proportion. He's 6, Cole. 6. You embarrassed me in front of everyone by acting like it was a funeral instead of a cake." Then came the guilt-laced ones. "Hunter's been crying since last night. I'm a single mom doing her best. You think you're so much better because you've got money and a backyard." Then came the shift. "Wait, what house title? Are you joking? Cole, seriously, what house title?" And that's when the silence flipped sides. Now she was the one panicking. Good. Let her sit with it. See, about 4 years ago, Amber had been in a rough spot. She was between jobs, freshly kicked out by her ex, the one she still doesn't talk about, and sleeping in her car with Hunter. I didn't find out until our cousin, Jess, ran into her at a gas station and called me. I didn't ask questions. I just gave her a key. It was one of the rental homes I'd bought early in my career. A small, single-story place in a decent neighborhood with a fenced yard. Nothing fancy, but clean and livable. I told her she could stay there rent-free until she got back on her feet. She cried, thanked me, promised she'd only be there a few months. She stayed for 3 years. In that time, I covered repairs, utilities, and even the property taxes because she kept saying she was almost there and just needed one more shot. I never pushed. I figured family helps family, even when it hurts a little. But a few months back, I quietly had the title transferred out of my rental LLC and into my personal name, just in case. I hadn't told Amber, but now I was glad I'd made that move. After the birthday fiasco and her message telling me not to come around anymore, I figured, okay, wish granted. By Monday, the calls stopped. But the whispers started. Aunt Mel called to check in, with that syrupy tone that always meant she'd been recruited. She talked in circles about how kids will be kids, and how Amber had a lot on her plate, and how you wouldn't want to tear the family apart over a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said. Her kid ruined my son's birthday cake. She watched and laughed, then told me I was overreacting. Still, Mel sighed. You did say something about unlisting a house title, and that's got everyone nervous. Funny how that part got everyone's attention, huh? Cole, she started, but I hung up. That week, Amber finally called herself. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was a mess of half sobs and half accusations. I don't even know what you meant, okay? What house? Are you threatening me? Are you seriously gonna evict your sister over a cake? I didn't reply, but I did call my lawyer. Now before you think I was being ruthless, let me explain. I wasn't planning to kick her out immediately. I just wanted to protect myself. I had this gut feeling like something was coming. Something bigger than ruined frosting or passive-aggressive texts. I was right, because a week later, I got a notice from the city. A permit request filed under my property's address for a home daycare. Amber was trying to open a daycare out of my house. She hadn't told me, hadn't asked. She'd gone straight to the city, listed herself as the property manager, and started the paperwork. My name was nowhere on it, even though I owned the deed outright. I sat at my kitchen table with the permit in one hand and my coffee mug in the other, heart thudding like a drum. This wasn't just overstepping. This was deliberate, calculated. She'd clearly been planning it for a while. Probably saw it as her way out, finally making her own money, starting her own business. And she was using my house, my name, my property, without permission. I called the zoning office the next morning and had the permit flagged for fraudulent information. The lady on the phone was polite but firm. Sir, if you're the actual owner and your name's not listed, that's a violation. We'll need to investigate. Amber showed up at my house that evening. She didn't knock, just marched up the driveway and started pounding on the door like she was the police. Cole, open up. I know you're in there. Max peeked around the hallway corner, wide-eyed. I gently pushed him back toward the living room and stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Amber was in full meltdown mode, hair wild, face flushed, pacing the porch like she couldn't stand still. You flagged my permit, she spat. Why would you do that? I've been working on this for months. I folded my arms. Without telling me. On a house that's not yours. You said I could stay there. Stay? Not run a business. Not lie to the city. Not commit fraud. She flinched. Fraud? Are you kidding me right now? You filled out a legal document claiming you manage a property you don't own. That's fraud, Amber. Her voice cracked. I was going to surprise you. Make it a legit thing. I was finally doing something for me. And your first move was lying. She didn't say anything. Just stood there, trembling with rage or fear. I couldn't tell. I'm not kicking you out, I said quietly. But I'm filing a formal termination of the verbal lease. You've got 60 days. Her jaw dropped. You're evicting me? I'm giving you 2 months to figure something out. More than most landlords would. We're not landlord and tenant, Cole. We're siblings. And siblings don't stab each other in the back. That was the moment it all shattered. She screamed, this guttural, angry sound, and stormed off the porch. But not before yelling over her shoulder. Don't expect to see Hunter again. You just cut yourself out of your nephew's life. I didn't answer. I didn't even move. Just stood there while the sun dipped below the trees and the porch light flickered on. That night, Max came to sit beside me on the couch again, like he had the morning after the party. Did Aunt Amber do something bad again? He asked, voice small. I looked at him, this little person who deserved so much more peace than our family could give him, and nodded. Yeah, but we're gonna be okay. He leaned into me, warm and trusting. The next day, I started getting calls from my uncle, my cousin, even my mom. People who hadn't reached out in months suddenly wanted to talk. Amber had clearly gone nuclear, telling everyone I was throwing her and Hunter out on the street. The kicker? She posted a Facebook status. When your own brother evicts you for trying to make a better life for your son, I hope karma is real. It got 117 likes. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't even like the comments defending me, because some people did defend me. Apparently not everyone had forgotten how many times I'd helped her. But a line had been crossed now, and whether she realized it or not, Amber had just turned a simmering feud into something else entirely. 2 days later, I opened my mailbox and found something that made my stomach drop. A certified envelope from a lawyer. Inside was a formal letter. Amber was suing me for wrongful eviction, verbal breach of contract, and financial damages due to business interference. And that was the breaking point. I wish I could say I laughed when I opened the envelope. That the whole thing felt so ridiculous I just tossed it on the kitchen counter and went on with my day. But I didn't laugh. I sat at my dining table for a full 20 minutes just staring at it, rereading each line like maybe the words would change the third or fourth time through. Wrongful eviction, breach of contract, emotional distress, business interference, damages totaling $92,000. Amber had actually found a lawyer willing to help her file this mess. I took a breath and turned the page. There was a typed statement attached, probably something her lawyer had helped her write. It painted a very different picture, one where she was a dedicated single mom who had been promised housing indefinitely by her successful brother, who had then cruelly turned on her when she tried to build a home daycare to support her child. She claimed I revoked her housing in retaliation after a minor disagreement at a child's birthday party. She even mentioned emotional trauma and Hunter's fear of abandonment now that they were facing displacement. I ran my hand through my hair, jaw tight. There was no way this would hold up in court. I knew that. But that didn't mean it wouldn't cause damage. Legal fees, time, reputation. Even if it got thrown out, even if the judge rolled his eyes, I'd still have to go through the motions. Hire a lawyer. File a response. Miss work. Explain to my business partner, Greg, why I was suddenly unavailable for showings and closings. For the first time in a long while, I felt it. That old, familiar weight pressing down. The one that makes you question if doing the right thing is even worth it. I'd spent years helping Amber. Not because I wanted something in return, but because I thought that's what family did. And now, she was turning that kindness into a weapon, twisting it into a story where I was the villain. And worst of all, I couldn't even say I was surprised. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not Max. Not my mom. Not even Rick, my neighbor, who I usually vented to when things got tense. I kept it to myself, stewing in silence. For the next week, I went through the motions. Dropped Max off at school. Smiled at clients. Took calls. Cooked dinner. But there was a hollowness in everything I did. Like I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then it did. One evening, I got a call from Greg. I knew from the second he said my name that something was wrong. Hey man, he said, voice careful. Listen, I just had the weirdest meeting with a potential buyer for the Jefferson duplex. He brought up your name and asked if you were the guy who evicts single moms for fun. My stomach turned. You're kidding. I wish. He said he read about it in some community Facebook group. Something about you shutting down a home daycare and kicking your sister and nephew out onto the street. I closed my eyes. Amber, that's what I figured. Look, I trust you. But this isn't great PR, especially when we're trying to land families looking to relocate. You might want to get ahead of it. He meant well, but the implication was clear. This could hurt business. The next morning, I woke up to find my name tagged in 3 different neighborhood threads. People arguing in comment sections. Some defending me. Others jumping to Amber's side with opinions based entirely on her version of events. One person posted a picture of my rental house with a caption that read, "This is the house where a mother and child are being forced out." Shameful. And that was when I hit bottom. Not the kind of bottom where you throw things or scream. No, this was the quiet kind. The kind where you sit on your back porch at 7 a.m., coffee gone cold in your hand, wondering if maybe it's your fault. Maybe you should have said something years ago. Set boundaries. Spoken up. Maybe you taught her, in your silence, that she could do whatever she wanted with no consequences. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But something in me went still, like a wire that had finally snapped from too much tension. That same afternoon, I took a drive out to the hills, just me and the silence. No calls. No messages. I parked at the overlook and just sat there, staring out over the trees and rooftops. It's funny how small everything looks from up high. Like all the drama and noise and pain can't quite reach you from up there. And that's when I made a decision. No more silence. No more keeping the peace at my own expense. No more letting people write my story while I stood in the background. That night, after I got home and put Max to bed, I opened my laptop and started gathering documents. Emails, texts, screenshots, lease forms, tax statements, utility bills. Even that picture I'd taken of the cake, destroyed and smeared with green frosting, with Hunter's little hands still caught in the act. I organized everything into folders, labeled and time-stamped. Then I called my lawyer, a woman named Dana I'd worked with a few times before when buying property. She listened to the situation, let out a long sigh, and said, "Well, Cole, sounds like it's about time we taught someone the difference between generosity and obligation." And just like that, the rebuild began. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fast, but it was mine. I countersued, not for damages, just a formal response demanding dismissal and attaching documentation proving ownership, lack of tenancy agreements, and fraudulent use of my address for business purposes. Dana filed a cease and desist to prevent Amber from spreading further false claims online. We sent copies of everything to the zoning office and flagged the daycare permit again, this time attaching the lawsuit. Meanwhile, I made quiet changes in my life. I pulled Max from his regular school carpool and started driving him myself, just in case Amber got any ideas. I called Greg and had a long, honest conversation. He backed me completely and even offered to do a short PR post on our business page about our values-driven real estate practices. We kept it vague, but the subtext was clear to anyone watching, and I started saying no. No to family members who tried to mediate on Amber's behalf. No to friends who said I should just let it go. No to the little voice in my head that kept whispering, "Maybe you are overreacting." Because I wasn't. Not anymore. The real shift, though, happened the night Max came into my office while I was sorting more documents and asked, "Is Aunt Amber mad at us?" I paused. "Yeah, buddy. She is." He fiddled with the edge of my desk. "Did we do something wrong?" I turned in my chair and looked him straight in the eyes. "No. But sometimes, doing the right thing makes people mad, especially when they're used to getting their way." He was quiet for a second. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I'm glad you're not letting her be mean anymore." That moment, that one sentence, was the rise. Because that's when I realized I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was showing my son what strength looked like. Not loud, not cruel, just quiet, firm, and unshakable. In the weeks that followed, things began to shift. The city zoning office officially rejected Amber's permit. Her lawyer dropped her case after Dana submitted our response, clearly realizing it was going nowhere. The Facebook gossip died down. Even the angry neighborhood threads disappeared after I posted one calm, factual comment under my own name, attaching proof of ownership and explaining the situation without drama. People backed off. Some even apologized. And Amber? She went dark. No more texts. No more calls. No more Facebook status updates. I didn't know what she was planning. I didn't trust her silence. But I wasn't afraid of it anymore. Because now I was ready. And then one quiet Thursday afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox that changed everything again. It was handwritten. Neat cursive on plain white stationery. No return address. Just 2 sentences. "I know what Amber did. You deserve to know everything. Call me." And at the bottom, a name I hadn't seen in years. Hunter's father. And that's where it got real. Hunter's father's name was Elijah. And the last time I'd heard his name spoken aloud was at a barbecue 7 years ago, when Amber told our aunt she didn't need a man weighing her down. After that, she erased him. No pictures. No mentions. No questions allowed. I never dug deeper, not because I didn't care, but because the topic was always a minefield. And Amber made it clear, he wasn't part of the story. But now, suddenly, there he was. His signature neat and deliberate on a note in my mailbox, his name inked in the kind of cursive that made you pay attention. I stared at the letter for a long time. "I know what Amber did. You deserve to know everything. Call me." There was a number at the bottom. No area code. It was local. I waited 2 days before I dialed it. I'm not sure why. Part of me didn't believe it was real. Part of me was afraid of what I'd hear. But the curiosity clawed at me, louder than the caution. When I finally hit the call button, the voice on the other end answered on the first ring. "Cole." It was him. He didn't even wait for me to say a word. "Thank God," he said, exhaling. "I've been trying to figure out how to reach you without blowing everything up." There was something calm and deliberate about his voice, measured, like a man who'd already rehearsed what he needed to say 1,000 times. I listened for almost 30 minutes without interrupting once. And what he told me shifted everything. He and Amber had never officially broken up. They weren't married, but they'd been living together when Hunter was born. He'd supported them, financially, emotionally, fully. But things changed when Amber's business idea fell apart. Apparently, she'd tried starting a wedding planning service. Invested most of Elijah's savings. Maxed out a joint credit card. Burned through his emergency fund chasing vision boards and influencers while ignoring actual clients. When the business tanked, She blamed him. He found out she'd been lying about expenses, charging personal purchases to the business, and hiding debt. When he confronted her, she kicked him out, told everyone he'd walked out on his son. He tried to fight for custody, but Amber threatened to claim he was abusive. She never filed anything, just scared him enough to back down. Said if he even thought about a court battle, she'd bury him in the court of public opinion. I didn't have a lawyer back then, Elijah said quietly. Didn't have the money to fight her, and I didn't want my son growing up in a war zone. So he walked away, but not completely. He kept tabs, quietly, through a friend of a friend who lived near Amber's old apartment. He saw pictures on social media, heard whispers when Hunter started school. He'd even reached out once through a mutual acquaintance, but Amber shut it down, claimed he was stalking her. I never stopped caring, he said. But I didn't think I had a shot until I saw what she did to you. That cake thing? That's not new. That's learned behavior. And if she's turning her son into her, then maybe it's time I stopped being afraid. We met in person 2 days later. I brought Max to my neighbor's house, and we met at a neutral coffee shop. Elijah looked tired, older than he should have for 37. But there was a steadiness in his eyes that told me he wasn't here to vent. He was here to act. We sat in that booth for 2 hours, going over everything. My lawsuit, Amber's online smear campaign, the permit, the house, the fake lease, her weaponized victim narrative. Then he dropped the real bomb. She's been collecting child support, he said. From a man who doesn't have custody. From me. For a kid I haven't been allowed to see. She files it every year as part of her single mother hardship paperwork. My jaw clenched. How? Through a friend. She's using him as a shell. Pays him to claim he's the custodial parent on paper, then files under his name. It's illegal, but it's buried in paperwork, and no one's questioned it. He didn't have the full paper trail, but he had enough breadcrumbs to start unraveling it. That's when the wheels began to turn. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't just trying to defend myself from Amber's chaos. I was preparing something careful, something deserved. The setup began that night. Step 1 was documentation. Elijah and I both went to Dana, my lawyer. I laid out the family drama, the lawsuit, the fake daycare permit, the online defamation. He laid out everything he had, financial records, emails, old photos, a timeline of events going back 7 years. Dana listened. She asked questions, took notes. Then she nodded, folded her hands on the desk, and said, "She's built her house out of lies. We're going to knock on the door and see how fast it collapses." Over the next few weeks, we worked in silence. Elijah quietly refiled for partial custody, with Dana's help and a new legal aid foundation backing him. They specialized in cases involving alienated fathers. He didn't aim to take Hunter away, just to get joint rights. Enough to expose the false narrative Amber had built. Meanwhile, Dana and I filed a motion to dismiss Amber's original lawsuit, with evidence of her fraud attached, including a notarized letter from Elijah stating she had no legal right to use the property for business, and confirming she lied to both the city and him. Then we turned to the house. I couldn't just throw her out without notice, but I could tighten the screws. Dana had me file a 60-day vacate notice, now official and documented through the county. No loopholes, no ambiguity. We also filed a complaint with the city zoning board, flagging the daycare permit again, this time with the added information about Amber collecting money from a fabricated business address. That triggered an audit. But the best move? That came from Elijah. He'd kept one bank statement, just one, from back when he and Amber were still together. It showed a large deposit from my account to hers. The original money I transferred when I first offered to help her all those years ago. "I always thought I'd need this one day," he said, sliding it across the table. It was dated, labeled, tagged as a loan to cover relocation and utilities. Not a gift, a loan. And while I'd never enforced it, Dana grinned when she saw it. "We can use this to establish a pattern," she said. "Show the court that your help was conditional, not open-ended. That she accepted support as temporary, not permanent. It undermines her entire wrongful eviction narrative." We were assembling something slow, quiet, devastating. While Amber kept spinning stories online about her cruel brother and her lost dreams, we were setting a stage. And then, the final piece fell into place. Elijah found something in an old shared Google Drive folder, something Amber had forgotten to delete. A scanned image of a daycare flyer she'd designed over a year ago, with my house address printed on the bottom. She'd been planning this since before Hunter ruined Max's cake. Before the permit. Before the lawsuit. It had all been part of the long con. A soft takeover of the house, using family ties to keep me quiet until she could flip the narrative and stake a claim. If I'd said no, I'd be the villain. If I said yes, I'd be footing the bill forever. But now I had everything. The false claims, the shady child support filings, the forged business paperwork, the public defamation, and a witness who'd once loved her enough to overlook the lies and now wanted his son back. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to move. And that moment was coming. Because the court hearing for the eviction was in 9 days. And Amber had no idea what was waiting for her inside that courthouse. Not just a lawyer. Not just a brother tired of being used. But someone who knew every corner of the story she'd tried to bury. And someone else who had finally stepped out of the shadows to help me burn the lies down. The trap was set, and she was walking straight into it. Now I just had to keep my mouth shut until it all unfolded. Courtrooms always smell the same, like old paper, stress, and whatever brand of coffee the clerk microwaved at 7 a.m. I'd been in a few for real estate disputes, zoning hearings, a messy tenant thing once. But this one felt different. Heavier. Like every slow burn, every swallowed insult, every time I'd bitten my tongue around Amber was sitting right there beside me. It was eviction day. Amber walked in 13 minutes late, sunglasses on her head, hair thrown into a messy bun like she was starring in her own dramatic docu-series. Hunter trailed behind her, tapping a toy truck against the wall. She didn't look at me at first. She made a show of sighing loudly as she sat down, pulling out her phone as if she were the real victim of an inconvenience. When she finally glanced my way, her expression flickered, first smug, then unsure, then angry. Dana, my lawyer, leaned close and whispered, "She brought no counsel. This is going to go very fast." Amber must have thought this was going to be a casual sibling spat the judge would smooth over in the name of family harmony. But she had no idea what was waiting for her. No idea that Elijah, quiet, steady Elijah, was sitting in the back row, hands folded, expression unreadable. When the judge called our case, Amber strutted forward and launched into a speech before anyone asked her a single question. "He's throwing me out," she said dramatically, pointing at me like I'd keyed her car in the courthouse parking lot. After years of me living there. No warning, no reason, just cruelty. And now my son and I are being put on the street because he's embarrassed over some birthday misunderstanding. The judge, a gray-haired man with the patience of a saint, held up a hand. "Ms. Wallace, please wait until you are asked to speak." Amber huffed, crossed her arms, and leaned back in the rickety wooden chair like she'd been gravely wronged. Dana stood and handed the judge our packet. "Your Honor, this is a formal response and countermotion. It includes documented proof of property ownership, proof of a 60-day notice served properly, and evidence regarding fraudulent attempts by Ms. Wallace to claim managerial rights to a property she does not own." The judge skimmed the documents. Notarized, dated, and verified through the county. He tapped the stack. "Ms. Wallace, this contradicts everything you've just said." Amber's jaw dropped open. "He's lying. I lived there for years. That makes it mine by residency." "That is not how property law works," the judge replied. She opened her mouth again, but Dana wasn't done. "And Your Honor," Dana said smoothly, "there is additional context relevant to Ms. Wallace's pattern of false claims." She motioned toward the back row. Elijah stood. Amber went pale. Absolutely ghost white. "Elijah Martin," he said clearly for the record. "Father of Hunter Wallace." The room went still. Even Hunter stopped tapping his truck. "I have submitted my own affidavit," Elijah continued, handing a copy to the clerk, detailing Ms. Wallace's attempts to use shell accounts to misrepresent custody and collect fraudulent child support, as well as copies of messages and documents showing ongoing deception and misuse of financial assistance from Mr. Wallace. Amber's voice cracked. "You don't get to talk. You abandoned." Elijah didn't raise his voice. "No. You pushed me out. You threatened to destroy me if I fought back." He turned to the judge. "I'm currently filing for joint custody. Ms. Wallace has repeatedly weaponized false narratives to manipulate friends, family, and legal entities, including using Mr. Wallace's property for unauthorized business filings." Dana stepped forward again, all of which speaks to her credibility regarding the current eviction case. Amber sputtered, "You can't do this." The judge looked over his glasses at her. Ms. Wallace, do you have any legal documentation proving your claims? Any lease? Any written agreement? Any proof of ownership, rent payments, or business authorization? Amber's lips trembled. No, but do you have counsel? No. Are you contesting the legitimacy of the documents submitted by the defendant? She sank back into the chair. I didn't think he'd do this to me. The judge set the papers aside. Ms. Wallace, you lived in the property rent-free as an act of goodwill by your brother. He served proper notice. He has provided evidence of fraudulent actions on your part. This eviction is valid and will proceed. Amber let out a sound halfway between a gasp and a sob. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? Respectfully, the judge said, that is outside the scope of this hearing. It was done in minutes. But the fallout was just beginning. Amber didn't speak to me when we walked out of the courtroom. She stared at me with an expression I'd seen only once before, back when we were kids, and Mom caught her breaking a vase she'd tried to blame on me. That same hollow disbelief. The same dawning realization that her story wasn't going to be the one people believed anymore. She stormed down the steps, grabbed Hunter's arm, and practically dragged him toward her car. Elijah watched them go, a quiet sadness in his eyes. She's not going to make this easy, he murmured. She never has, I said. He nodded once, firmly. But I'm not walking away again. And for the first time, I believed him. The eviction was carried out legally, respectfully, quietly. No police escort. No big scene. Just a scheduled move-out date, a few signatures, and a property inspection. Amber left the house in worse shape than she found it. Nothing catastrophic, but enough scratches, dents, and broken fixtures to show she didn't care anymore. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word. Just shoved a set of keys into my palm and walked away, head down, shoulders tense, Hunter following silently behind her. A week later, her Facebook account vanished. So did the posts, the smear campaigns, the little jabs. Family members stopped calling, too. Some embarrassed, some pretending they had never picked sides. But the biggest shift came from the court's response to Elijah's filings. Turns out, the judge took the fraud allegations seriously. Very seriously. Amber was ordered to provide full financial documentation for the last 5 years. Every child support claim, every bank transfer, every form tied to the friend who'd been posing as the custodial parent. Investigators dug deeper. Within a month, her fake filings unraveled. The daycare permit fraud got flagged to a separate department, triggering yet another review. And when her friend was questioned, he panicked and confessed everything. Amber's house of cards didn't fall. It crumpled all at once. Custody hearings began. Elijah gained supervised visitation almost immediately. When Hunter saw him for the first time in years, he didn't scream or hide or cling to Amber like she'd always claimed. He just stared at Elijah for a long moment, then asked softly, "Do you like dinosaurs?" Elijah cried after that visit. He didn't hide it. And over time, Hunter started warming to him, responding, smiling, asking questions, drawing pictures with 2 houses instead of 1. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. And me? I rebuilt quietly. Business improved once all the drama faded from the neighborhood gossip mill. Greg and I sold 2 properties that spring. Max started soccer. We cleaned the dinosaur frosting stain off the patio table, though a faint green tint still catches the light on sunny days. Sometimes I catch myself looking at it and thinking how everything really started over a ruined cake. Not because the cake mattered, but because it was the moment I finally saw the truth. Keeping the peace isn't the same as having peace. I stopped choosing silence. I stopped accepting chaos disguised as family. And in doing so, I gave Max a father who actually stood up for himself. And I gave myself something I hadn't had in years. A life without walking on eggshells. The last time I saw Amber was outside the courthouse after another custody hearing. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just looked at me, tired, brittle, cracked in places she never thought she would be. "I hope you're happy," she said quietly. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't throw her words back at her. I just said, "I'm finally honest." She blinked, as if she didn't understand the sentence. Then she turned away, and that was it. No fireworks. No dramatic collapse. Just the quiet truth settling where lies used to sit. Months later, when things had calmed and routines had settled, Max asked me something while we were walking to the car after soccer practice. "Dad, Why did Hunter's mom get mad at you? I thought for a moment before answering. Some people get upset when the truth stops working in their favor. He nodded slowly, as if filing that away for some future moment in his life. We got in the car. He buckled his seatbelt. I turned the key, and as we drove home, windows down, warm air blowing in, Max humming some song he'd made up, I felt something settle in me. Not victory, not spite, just peace. Clean, quiet peace. After years of chaos, years of swallowing my words, years of letting someone else write the story, the ending finally belonged to me. And the final line? I didn't lose a sister. I stopped losing myself. You ever have one of those moments where you're standing outside a fancy venue, dressed in a suit that still smells like dry cleaning fluid, heart pounding, because today's supposed to be a celebration, only to be told you're not welcome? Yeah, that was me. My name's Lucas, I'm 29, and I paid for my sister's entire $25,000 wedding, every last catered canopy and centerpiece, only to be turned away at the door like some random party crasher. The security guy didn't even make eye contact. He just said, "Sorry, you're not on the list. You've been blacklisted." Blacklisted? At my sister's wedding. The one I paid for. But let me back up, because the real story starts way before that. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. There's me, then my younger sister, Ava, who just turned 27, and our baby brother, Max, who's 23 and kind of floats through life like he's in a music video. Our parents passed away in a car accident when I was 21. Ava had just started college, and Max was still in high school. I dropped out of school and picked up 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. I gave up a lot in those years, not that I'm asking for pity. I did it because I love them, because that's what family is supposed to do. Eventually, things turned around. I taught myself to code in the late night hours between shifts and started freelancing. Then came a software startup with 2 friends, a few lucky breaks, and before I knew it, I was making more money in a month than I used to see in a year. I didn't flaunt it. I bought a modest house, helped Max finish college, paid off Ava's student loans, and just tried to be the kind of big brother our parents would have been proud of. For most of the last decade, Ava and I were close. Or so I thought. She used to call me when she needed help with her taxes or when her car wouldn't start. I walked her down the aisle at her first wedding. Yeah, that didn't work out. And I even helped her move out after the divorce. We laughed, fought, shared Netflix passwords, all of it. But something started to change about a year and a half ago when she met Daniel. Daniel's the kind of guy who wears a luxury watch to brunch and makes sure you notice it. Real estate agent with a trust fund and the personality of a knockoff motivational speaker. From day one, I didn't trust him. He spoke to waiters like they were dirt, made passive jabs about how lucky Ava was to have family support, and referred to me as the wallet behind my back, which I only found out because Max overheard him at a barbecue. Ava changed around him. Slowly. At first, it was subtle. She stopped texting as often, canceled dinner plans last minute, laughed a little too hard at Daniel's mean jokes. Then it got weirder. She started dodging questions about her relationship, brushing off concerns, and once snapped at me for not respecting her choices when I gently suggested Daniel might not be who he pretends to be. When they got engaged, I congratulated her with a genuine smile, even though my gut felt off. I offered to help with the wedding, not because I wanted to be involved in Daniel's life, but because I loved my sister. She hesitated at first, but eventually said yes. Her voice changed when she did. Not grateful, not excited, just hesitant, like she was saying yes to a business transaction. Nothing too flashy, I told her. Just tell me what you need, and I'll take care of it. A week later, I got a spreadsheet. I'm not joking. A full-on, itemized, color-coded Google sheet labeled Ava and Daniel's wedding budget. Flowers, venue, catering, bar tab, dresses, photography. Everything tallied up to just under $25,000. No note, no thank you, just a link. It stung a little, but I told myself she was just busy. Weddings are stressful, right? I wired the money. Over the next few months, I heard barely anything. No invites to tastings. No updates. No look at the dress, texts. Just the occasional vague group message about where to send RSVPs and who was assigned what hotel. When I asked if she needed help setting up the rehearsal dinner, she replied with a thumbs-up emoji and said, "Already handled." When I asked about my +1, she said it was tight on space. I figured maybe she was just overwhelmed. That was the generous version. The darker part of me wondered if Daniel had gotten in her ear, whispering things, drawing lines, isolating her. But I didn't want to start a fight, so I let it go. A week before the wedding, I got a generic digital invite via email. Not even my full name, just L.J. and the venue address. No itinerary, no schedule, just the bare minimum. I called Max and asked if he got anything different. He said yeah. His invite came in a thick envelope with gold calligraphy and a wax seal. Weird, he said. I thought they all looked like that. Something didn't sit right with me. So I called Ava. Hey, I said. We good? Yeah, why? She replied, way too casually. Just haven't heard much. Wanted to check in. I'm still bringing the gift and all, but there's no need for a gift, she cut in quickly. What do you mean? You've done enough. Her tone wasn't warm. It wasn't appreciative. It was clinical. Like I'd fulfilled a contractual obligation and now needed to stop talking. I stayed quiet for a beat, then said, okay, well, I'll see you Saturday. Sure, she said. It's gonna be great. Click. The call left me cold. Saturday came. I got dressed in a navy suit, polished shoes, and even booked a black car to drop me off. Figured after dropping 25 grand, I'd at least show up looking the part. I had a handwritten letter for Ava in my jacket pocket, something I wanted to give her in private. Just something that said, I'm proud of you. I know Mom and Dad would be too. When the car pulled up to the venue, a gorgeous converted vineyard just outside the city, I was impressed. The decorations were elegant, string lights flickering in the early evening light, guests mingling near a champagne fountain. A harpist was playing somewhere off to the side. It looked like a movie scene. I stepped out, straightened my tie, and walked toward the entrance. That's when it happened. The security guy, a tall man with an earpiece and clipboard, stepped in front of me. Name: Lucas Jennings. He scanned the list. Then again. Then squinted at the iPad like it was lying to him. Sorry, sir, he said. You're not on the list. I blinked. What? No, that can't be right. I'm the bride's brother. Sir, he said again, more firmly this time. I was instructed that if anyone by your name showed up, you were not to be allowed in. What are you talking about? My voice cracked a little. I paid for this wedding. He gave me a sympathetic look, the kind that makes you want to scream. I'm sorry, he said. I don't know anything else. I just have instructions. I stepped back, heart hammering. Guests were walking by, some giving me awkward glances, others pretending not to see. I felt like I'd been slapped. No, like I'd been shoved out of my own house. I called Ava. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. I stood there in the cooling dusk, fists clenched, breath shaky, wondering what the heck had just happened. That's when Max called me. And when I told him what happened, he paused. Long enough for me to feel it in my gut. Lucas, he said slowly, I think you need to hear something. I stepped away from the main path, into the shadow of a tall hedge, and Max told me what he'd overheard. And what he said made my stomach turn. I felt the letter in my pocket crumpling under my tightened fingers. And that's when the switch flipped in my brain. That's when I stopped being the supportive older brother and started thinking about how to burn the whole day down before she even walked down the aisle. I remember standing there, phone pressed against my ear, listening to Max's voice crackle through the line. At first, it was hard to make out. There was music in the background, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Then his words came through clear, so sharp they could have cut me clean in half. Lucas, I think they planned this. I froze. What do you mean? He took a breath. Daniel's mom was bragging about how classy it was to keep the wedding exclusive. She said Ava made the decision to scale back the guest list to only people who were, and I quote, supportive of the couple's new future. My mouth went dry. She said you were too controlling, that your presence would be a disruption. I turned away from the entrance, walking blindly past the vineyard's stone wall, through a gravel path that crunched beneath my shoes. I didn't want anyone to see my face. Not like this. Max, I said slowly, you're inside right now, right? Yeah. I got here early. I was sitting with a few of Daniel's cousins. But bro, they were talking like they all knew. Like this was decided a while ago. I clenched my jaw. And Ava? She's okay with this. He hesitated. She didn't even flinch when Daniel's aunt called you the donor. The donor. Like I was some anonymous organ bank they used to keep the whole event alive. No name, no face. Just a bank account. I felt something in me start to crack. And then Max said something that took that crack and split it wide open. She saw me talking to you just now, he muttered. I think she knows. She just walked away. No eye contact. Like she's embarrassed. That was it. That was the moment. The moment I knew something had changed forever. This wasn't about a mix-up. It wasn't about limited seating. It wasn't even about Daniel and his smirking, slimy presence infecting everything he touched. It was Ava, my sister. She chose this. She chose to erase me from the biggest moment of her life, after everything I'd done. After raising her, shielding her from the worst years of our lives, giving her everything I could when I had nothing. And she couldn't even send a text to say, "I'm sorry," but there was no warning, just a blacklist. I sat down on a low stone bench behind the hedges, staring at the cracked screen of my phone like it held some kind of answer. I scrolled through our messages, years of birthday texts, inside jokes, little hearts sent after long calls. All of it, now meaningless. I thought about the day I paid off her student loans. I'd kept it a secret for weeks. Then one night, when she called me in tears about her car getting booted for unpaid parking tickets, I told her, "Check your balance." She screamed, laughed, cried, said I was the best brother in the world. That girl, where did she go? Was this Daniel's doing? Or was this just who she became when no one needed to depend on me anymore? I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal, or the possibility that she never saw me as more than a safety net. Max texted me a few minutes later. She just asked where you were. I told her you were outside. She shrugged and said, "Well, he wasn't supposed to come." I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't reply. That moment, sitting alone, rejected, humiliated, was my breaking point. Not because I'd been locked out of a party, not even because I'd wasted $25,000, but because my sister, the one I thought I'd sacrificed everything for, didn't care enough to send a single word of explanation, of apology, of anything. She just erased me, like I was inconvenient, disposable. I stayed on that bench until the sky began to dim and the soft yellow glow of the vineyard lights lit up the path. I could hear faint music now, a string quartet playing something gentle, guests laughing, the sounds of wine glasses being raised in toasts. And that's when something inside me snapped into focus. If they thought I was just the donor, if they thought they could use me and toss me aside like an empty gift bag, they had another thing coming. Because what they didn't know, what Ava had clearly forgotten, was that I hadn't just sent money. I controlled the money. The payments were done through my company's corporate account. I had strings tied to every vendor, every contract. The florist, the caterers, the lighting team, the sound crew, they all had terms that required final authorization and sign-off, even after deposit. Especially the venue, which I personally negotiated down by 15% in exchange for handling liability coverage through my business. I hadn't told Ava. She wouldn't have understood the paperwork. She just sent me numbers, and I made it all happen. They thought I was just the wallet? No, I was the architect. And they had built this entire fairy tale wedding on a foundation they didn't even realize was mine. I stood up slowly, brushing dust from my pants, and started walking back toward the gravel lot. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I wasn't going to yell or shout or throw punches. I was going to make one call. Just one. But first, I needed to gather receipts. I dialed my assistant, Jamie. She picked up on the second ring. "Lucas, aren't you at your sister's wedding?" "About that," I said, keeping my voice level. "There's been a development. I need you to send me copies of the vendor contracts for the Mitchell Vineyard event. Full versions, especially catering, sound, and tent lighting. And check the release clauses." Okay. Right now." "Yes, right now." I hung up and called another number. Malcolm, the head of the catering company. We'd done events together before, and I knew his team relied heavily on our ongoing business for referrals. "Hey, Malcolm. It's Lucas Jennings." "Lucas, everything okay? I thought you were at the..." "Listen," I said, cutting him off. "This is delicate. I need to confirm. Has the final authorization gone through for the Burton Mitchell wedding?" "No, not yet. We have the deposit, but we're still pending your final go-ahead." "What?" "Because there's been a situation," I said calmly, "and I'm pulling the approval." There was a pause. "You're pulling?" "You heard me. And I'll make it up to you. I'll cover any incurred costs. But I can't have this event associated with our business anymore." "Wow. Okay. That's unexpected. I'll explain later." One by one, I made the calls. The florist, the lighting company, the string quartet. Each time, I kept my voice calm. Professional. I didn't rant. I didn't explain. I just said there had been a breach in agreement, and I was rescinding approval. By the time I hung up the last call, my heart was thudding in my chest. I wasn't doing this out of pettiness. I was doing this because I realized something essential, something I had forgotten over the years of bending over backwards to keep my family afloat. Being generous does not mean being a doormat. You can give everything you have to someone, but if they don't respect you, they will always find a way to take more. Ava had made a choice. She decided to erase me from her narrative. So I decided to erase the wedding she built on my back. I texted Max. Hey, just hang tight. Things might get interesting. Max, what do you mean? Me, just watch. I'm not going to ruin her day. Me, I'm going to cancel it. Max didn't reply. I started walking again, this time toward the parking lot. My car was waiting at the curb. I opened the door, sat down, and stared out the window at the glowing vineyard in the distance. I thought about Mom and Dad. I thought about what they'd say if they could see this mess. And then I thought about something else, a memory I hadn't touched in years. It was the week after our parents' funeral. Ava was sobbing in the hallway, begging me not to let the state split us up. Don't let them take Max, she'd cried. Please, Luke. I'd made her a promise that day. I won't let anything happen to us, I told her. I'll keep us together, no matter what. I kept that promise, even when it broke me. And now, she'd chosen to forget. So I was choosing to remember who I really was. Not a donor, not a wallet, not a backup plan. I was the reason this wedding was even happening. And in a few minutes, it wasn't going to happen at all. I didn't drive home right away. After I made the last call and sat in the quiet of the car, staring out at the golden-lit vineyard that was about to become a silent shell of a celebration, I thought I'd feel satisfied. Vindicated, maybe. But the truth? It felt hollow. Not because I regretted what I did. I didn't. They needed to be reminded that money isn't a faceless river of free favors, and love isn't a vending machine where you press buttons for what you want and ignore the machine after. But still, I didn't feel proud. I just felt done. I drove past the freeway exit to my neighborhood and kept going. I didn't even know where I was heading. Somewhere far enough from the wedding, from the city, from the weight of being the guy who always has it together. Eventually, I ended up at the beach. Not some crowded boardwalk with kids and vendors. I mean the old, half-forgotten stretch of sand where we used to go as kids. Mom would pack peanut butter sandwiches and those sad juice boxes with more foil than flavor. I sat down on the sand, letting the ocean wind undo the stiffness in my chest, and just watched the waves crash for what felt like hours. That night, I stayed in a motel off the coast. No laptop, no phone calls, no noise. Just silence. When I finally checked my phone the next morning, it was a mess. Max had called me 6 times. There were texts from numbers I didn't recognize. And then one from Ava. Why would you do that to me? That was all it said. No, hey. No, let's talk. No, what happened? Just a sentence loaded with blame, as if I'd ruined something she hadn't already torn apart. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say. I did. But because I didn't trust myself not to burn the last fragile bridge between us. And maybe that bridge needed to burn. Max finally got through to me later that evening. He filled in the blanks. The venue staff started quietly packing up as guests were seated. The champagne table was cleared. The lights dimmed. The band stopped playing mid-song. People thought it was some kind of dramatic reveal, like Ava was about to enter on a white horse or something. Then the officiant left. Then the flowers were removed. And finally, the event manager stepped forward, cleared her throat, and said, "We apologize, but due to unforeseen circumstances, the event will not proceed." Max said Daniel freaked out. Ava looked like she was trying not to cry. And their families, those smug, backhand comment-making relatives, were left blinking under a string of lights that no longer had power. No one knew what happened. They just knew something big had gone wrong. And I wasn't there to take the fall for it. After Max told me everything, I felt something strange. Not victory, I still didn't feel that. But something quieter. Calmer. Like I'd finally let go of a weight I'd carried for too long. The weight of trying to be the glue, the hero, the older brother who could fix everything with enough effort. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just letting it fall apart. And weirdly, it felt like a kind of freedom. Over the next few weeks, I went quiet. I took a break from my company, told Jamie to handle all client comms, and forwarded my emails to an archive folder. I needed time to think. Not just about what happened, but about why it hurt so badly, and what it said about who I'd become. When you grow up having to be the responsible one, it messes with your sense of identity. You start to measure your worth by how much you give, how much you endure, how many fires you can put out before collapsing. I realized I had built my entire adult life around being needed, by Ava, by Max, by my team, by everyone. And when Ava finally stopped needing me, she discarded me, like a scaffold after the building is complete. It was a brutal realization, but it gave me something I didn't expect: clarity. I started journaling. Not the cringe kind with Dear Diary and scented pages. Just a plain, ugly notebook where I wrote what I actually felt. Anger, loss, resentment, but also relief. Relief that I wasn't stuck in that dynamic anymore. Relief that I could finally ask, what do I want? Turns out, I didn't even know. So I tried to find out. I signed up for a pottery class. Random, I know, but something about molding clay with my hands, something messy, slow, and imperfect, felt healing. I spent weekends at local farmers markets, not because I needed to buy anything, but because I liked talking to people who weren't trying to get something from me. Just old couples selling jams, college kids making candles, people who smiled with their eyes and didn't care who I was. I reconnected with a friend I hadn't seen in years, Nadia. She'd been one of the only people who showed up at my dad's funeral, even though we hadn't spoken since high school. She heard about it through someone else and came anyway, just sat beside me in silence while I stared at the casket. We met for coffee, then lunch, then long walks where we didn't check our phones once. She never asked about the wedding. She just said, "You look lighter," and left it at that. It wasn't romantic. Not at first. Just real. Grounding. And as the weeks stretched into months, I started rebuilding my relationship with Max too. We began grabbing drinks every Friday. No agenda, no family gossip, just beers and sarcasm and the kind of inside jokes that make you forget how heavy life can be. Max confessed he'd been feeling stuck for a while, unsure of his career, his purpose. I told him I'd help him figure it out, but only if he wanted it. No pressure. I want it, he said, but only if it's you helping. Not the version of you that solves everything. Just you. That hit me harder than I expected. So I let myself just be me. Not the fixer. Not the donor. Just Lucas. I slowly returned to work, but differently this time. I delegated more. I built boundaries. I stopped answering emails after 6 p.m. I even started working on a side project, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. An app for caregivers and siblings who fall into the parentified child trap. A way for people like me to share their stories, find resources, and not feel so alone. I called it Unburden, because that's what I'd always wanted for myself, and what I now wanted to give others. The funny thing is, once I stopped trying to prove my worth by giving everything away, more things started coming to me. Clients I admired reached out. A small podcast asked to interview me about entrepreneurship and mental health. I was invited to speak at a local college, not about coding or startups, but about resilience. Apparently, people noticed the shift. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd felt broken by being too useful. Meanwhile, Ava stayed silent. For months. No apology. No explanation. She didn't reach out on my birthday. Didn't return the letter I mailed her. A letter that wasn't bitter, just honest. A letter that said, "I loved you. I always did. But I can't keep loving someone who treats me like a transaction." I never heard back. And yet, for the first time, I was okay with that. Because I was learning that closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build yourself, brick by brick, moment by moment, until you can stand inside it and breathe. Still, there was one last piece I hadn't touched. The part of me that wanted Ava to understand. That still pictured us, gray-haired, old, laughing about this someday. The part that hadn't quite let go. And then, about 8 months after the wedding I got a call. From a blocked number. I let it ring. Then ring again. And on the third ring, I picked up. A familiar voice filled the line. A voice I hadn't heard in what felt like a lifetime. Lucas. It was Ava. She sounded different. Raw. Fragile. Like someone had peeled off the mask and left nothing but the real, messy person underneath. I don't know where to start, she said. I stayed silent. I messed up, she whispered. I messed up so bad. Her voice broke. And then she said something I never thought I'd hear. Can I tell you what really happened? I looked out the window of my home office, at the spring leaves dancing in the wind. And I said, "Go ahead." I didn't speak for a few seconds after Ava said those words. Can I tell you what really happened? because part of me wasn't ready to hear it. For months, I'd built a new version of myself. Calmer, clearer, less bound by the expectations that had once weighed me down. I wasn't angry anymore, not like I had been. Not that searing, restless kind of rage that fueled the phone calls I made the night of the wedding. But underneath all of that progress, there was still a bruise, still a sting. And now, here was Ava, on the other end of the line, sounding like a ghost of herself, like someone who'd finally realized the damage she'd done, or maybe just the consequences of it. "Are you there?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here," I said quietly. "Talk." She exhaled. It sounded shaky, like she'd been holding her breath for months. "I don't know how to explain this without sounding like a complete idiot," she began. "But I wasn't the one who blacklisted you. I didn't even know." I blinked. "What do you mean you didn't know? Max said you told him I wasn't supposed to come." She went quiet for a second. "I said that because I panicked. Because Daniel told me you chose not to come. That you'd said you were too busy. That you wanted out." My blood went cold. "That doesn't make any sense," I said. "You spoke to me days before the wedding." "I know." I was confused, but I didn't question it. I should have, but I didn't want another fight. "You have no idea how much pressure I was under." I clenched my jaw. "You had every opportunity to call me and ask." "I know." Every chance to double-check. To say, "Hey, this feels off." "I know." The silence stretched again. On her end, I could hear a train horn in the distance. She must have been near her apartment downtown. "I let him isolate me," she said finally. "I let him decide who was in and who was out. And I told myself it was easier that way. That if I just stayed quiet and kept smiling, things would settle." She paused. "But they didn't." I stayed quiet. She continued. "The day of the wedding, when everything started falling apart, I thought it was karma. Like the universe was finally screaming in my face. I didn't even try to fix it. I just froze. And when people asked what happened, I panicked and told them you never showed. And after, I asked, why didn't you call me after? Because I was ashamed." The words sat heavy between us. "Daniel left 3 weeks after the wedding," she said. "Turns out, once the party was over and the photos were staged, he didn't really want to be married. He just wanted the image." I rubbed my forehead. "So you were never really in control." "I thought I was," she said. "But I wasn't. Not of the guest list, not of the money, not of myself." Another pause. "Then, I was angry for a while. I blamed you. I blamed everyone. But the truth is, I let it happen. I let him talk about you like you were an ATM. I didn't defend you. I didn't protect you. And worst of all, I believed things I knew weren't true just because it was easier than confronting him." Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Lucas." For the first time in nearly a year, I closed my eyes and let myself feel everything I'd been burying. The confusion, the betrayal, the grief of losing a version of my sister I thought I'd always have. And oddly enough, it didn't consume me. It passed through me, like a wave that finally hit shore. "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. "I wish it had come sooner." "Me too." We talked for almost an hour. She didn't try to justify what happened. She didn't ask for anything. She just sat in it, admitted it, owned it. And that was more than I ever expected. But what she said next, that changed everything. "There's something else," she said. "Something I didn't tell you before. About the money." I frowned. "What about it?" "You remember that spreadsheet I sent you? The wedding budget." "Of course." Daniel patted it. My stomach dropped. "What?" "He added items to inflate the total. Things we didn't actually need. Things that were never even ordered. Like that custom backdrop from Italy. Fake. That ice sculpture of the two of us. Never existed. He just made stuff up." I felt my pulse quicken. "And the worst part," she continued, "was that he had the gall to brag about it to his friends. Said you were too rich to notice. That you were so desperate to play the hero, you'd never question it." I was stunned. "How much did he take?" "I don't know. Maybe 6, 7 grand. More? He used a shell account and rerouted part of the deposit after you wired it." I went completely still. This wasn't just betrayal. This was fraud. He stole from me, through her. And now, months later, he was off living his next lie while I was left with the wreckage. Ava was crying now. Quiet tears. "I should have seen it," she whispered. "I should have stopped it. But I wasn't listening anymore." My mind was racing. Not with rage. With calculation. This was different now. This wasn't just personal. This was financial. Documented. Traceable. And unlike before, I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was clear. And when I'm clear, I'm dangerous. Over the next few days, I got to work. The first thing I did was revisit all the contracts I'd filed for the wedding. I had every invoice, every email chain, every payment receipt. Jamie had organized it all neatly in our event folder, which, at the time, I'd created purely for tax purposes. Now it was evidence. I called my company's accountant, Andrea. "Hey," I said, "I need your help with something outside of work." I gave her a quick summary. Not the emotional stuff, just the facts. She was quiet for a beat, then said, "You have receipts?" "Everything." Then he's toast. With her help, we cross-referenced the actual service charges with the ones listed in Ava's spreadsheet. Sure enough, there were discrepancies. The Italian marble centerpiece rental? Total fabrication. The private post-wedding yacht cruise? Non-existent. In fact, most of the charges that had bumped the wedding from $17,000 to $25,000 were complete fiction. I tracked the wire transfers. I traced the routing numbers. And buried deep in one of the early deposit invoices was an alternate payment destination, a dummy LLC under Daniel's name that led to a checking account in Miami. The idiot didn't even try to hide it. With that in hand, I reached out to an old friend, Leo. He was a corporate lawyer who owed me a favor. We'd worked together on a joint venture 2 years back, and I'd pulled him out of a massive deadline mess by stepping in last minute. I told him everything. He asked one question. "You want to sue him or bury him?" I didn't hesitate. "Both." Leo smiled through the phone. "Let's play chess." We started building a case, quietly. Fraud, misrepresentation, breach of agreement. Because the money had gone through my corporate account, it gave us stronger legal grounds. And since the dummy LLC used my name to secure false deposits, we had a potential criminal angle too. But I didn't stop there. Remember that app I'd been building? Unburden? The one for people like me, the quietly responsible ones, the siblings who become parents, the caretakers who never ask for anything? Well, it was nearing beta launch. And I had an idea. I wasn't going to just take Daniel to court. I was going to turn the entire experience into something useful. I called Nadia one night, told her what I was thinking. "I want to do a full podcast series," I said, "about invisible burdens. The emotional cost of always being the strong one. I want to talk about my story, what happened with Ava, the wedding, everything. But anonymized. Not to call anyone out. Just to help people feel seen." She didn't even pause. "I'll help you produce it." So while Leo built the case in the background, Nadia and I started planning the show. We called it the Donor Complex, a nod to what Ava's in-laws had labeled me that day. Each episode would unpack a different layer of what it means to be the dependable one, the unthanked one, the backbone no one notices until it breaks. We recorded the first episode in a rented studio that smelled like dust and ambition. And when I told my story, when I laid it out, piece by piece, I didn't feel shame. I felt power, control, clarity. Because now I wasn't just reacting to betrayal. I was using it, turning it into something real. And the best part? Daniel had no idea what was coming. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a slow, quiet setup. A signature here, a recording there, a story told to the right audience, a lawsuit that arrives like a dagger in silk wrapping. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about rebuilding. Better, stronger, with receipts. The thing they never tell you about revenge is that it doesn't happen in one big cinematic explosion. It's quieter, slower, piece by piece, like tightening a series of bolts until something finally snaps in the exact spot you intended. And by the time your target realizes what's happening, the game's already over. And that was exactly how it went down with Daniel. For months, Leo and I built the case in silence. Deliberate, methodical silence. We pulled bank records. We subpoenaed vendor statements. We gathered digital copies of the padded invoices, the dummy LLC filings, and every last scrap of paperwork tied to that wedding. And we did it all without telling Ava, not because we wanted to hurt her, but because she needed to stay clean. I wasn't dragging her into this unless I had no choice. In the meantime, the Donor Complex podcast launched, and it blew up faster than either Nadia or I expected. We weren't doing it for money. Each episode was just me talking honestly about what it feels like to be the reliable one, the fixer, the person people rely on until the moment you need support yourself. It was raw and unpolished. And that's exactly why people resonated with it. Messages flooded in. People telling me they finally felt understood. People crying as they listened. People saying they'd lived their whole lives in the shadow of someone else's expectations. We kept names anonymous, of course. I never once mentioned Daniel or Ava or the wedding by detail. But those who knew, knew. About 3 weeks after episode 3 dropped, Ava called again. I listened, she said softly. To all of it. Yeah. I didn't know it felt like that. I didn't know you were carrying so much. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She took a breath. I talked to a therapist. That surprised me, in a good way. And I'm trying. I'm trying to understand why I let myself be manipulated. Why I shut you out. Why I didn't fight for you. That's good, I said quietly. I want to fix things between us, she said. I know it'll take time, but I want my brother back. For the first time, those words didn't hit the old bruise. They hit something gentler. I'm not going anywhere, I told her. But things will be different now. I know. We talked more over the next few weeks. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. No pretending everything was fine. No sweeping things under the rug. If we were rebuilding, it was from the foundation up, not the old, cracked one. But while that relationship mended, Daniel's life unraveled. And I didn't even have to lift a finger. The first blow came when Leo filed the civil suit. We served him at his real estate office. The moment he saw my name on the paperwork, he apparently stuttered so hard he couldn't finish speaking to his client. The suit outlined everything: fraud, misappropriation of funds, unlawful enrichment, falsified invoices, trademark misuse of my company name in the dummy LLC, and even tax violations thanks to the shady rerouting of deposits. The total damages? $38,600 plus penalties. And that was just civil. Daniel tried to deny it, of course. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Said I'd misread the transfers. His lawyer tried to intimidate us with letters that sounded like someone Googled legal threats. But the documents didn't lie. And when the bank records came back proving the dummy LLC was tied to his personal social security number, it was checkmate. Then the criminal charges landed. I didn't push for jail, though Leo said we easily could have pursued it. Instead, we pushed for something more practical: restitution. Full payback. Plus fees. Plus interest. Plus a court order preventing him from opening any financial account under a business name for 5 years. The man worked in real estate. That restriction alone was a career-ending blow. Next, the podcast audience found him. Not because I named him, but because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. Someone recognized details. Someone else connected dots. A few listeners who knew him personally confirmed pieces of the story. Suddenly, his social media pages were full of people asking why he stole wedding money, why he isolated a young woman from her family, why he set up a fake LLC. He responded poorly. Very poorly. One screenshot from his Instagram story had him saying, "People need to mind their business. Some people are obsessed with making drama." It didn't help. If anything, it poured gasoline on the fire. A client of his who heard the rumors pulled their listing agreement. Then another. Then a third. By the time we reached the settlement hearing 4 months later, he had lost most of his commissions, and his reputation was dragging behind him like a shredded banner. He showed up to court looking like someone who hadn't slept in days. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Daniel just stared at me. Not with anger. With fear. The judge reviewed the documents, the transfers, the timeline, the false invoices, and ruled in our favor within 15 minutes. Daniel was ordered to pay full restitution and structured payments within 36 months, with wage garnishment if he missed a single one. After the ruling, he approached me in the hallway. His voice was hoarse. "You really couldn't just let it go?" "Let it go," I repeated. "You stole from me. You used my sister. You threw her family away so you could control her. And then you lied about it when you got caught." He swallowed. "You ruined my life." "No," I said calmly. "You did." He opened his mouth again, but his lawyer pulled him aside. And that was the last time I ever saw him. Ava didn't try to defend him. In fact, she apologized again, not for him, but for herself, for letting it all happen under her nose. She admitted she'd fallen for someone who wore confidence like cologne, but didn't have any real substance underneath. "I kept choosing the version of him I wanted," she said quietly, "not the one who actually existed." Recovery wasn't quick or easy for either of us. But slowly, we rebuilt our relationship. Not the old dynamic where I carried everything, but a new one where we were equals. Ava got a part-time job at a nonprofit. She started therapy regularly. She spent weekends with Max and me, just watching movies or cooking dinner. We talked about the wedding only once more, months after the court case closed. I know it'll always be a scar, she said, but I hope it won't always feel like a wound. It won't, I told her. Scars mean healing. And she nodded, kneeling on the couch to hug me tightly. As for me, the Donor Complex podcast went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. It landed me speaking engagements, interviews, panel invites. But more importantly, it connected me with thousands of people who'd lived through what I did. The guilt, the burden, the silent exhaustion. Unburden, the app, launched 4 months later and gained traction faster than any project I'd ever done. It became my passion, my mission. For the first time, I wasn't building to be needed. I was building to be understood. And then, something happened that surprised even me. Ava, one night after dinner, said, "I listened to your latest episode. The one about forgiveness. Yeah. You said forgiveness isn't the same as letting someone back into your life. Right. But you also said forgiving yourself is harder than forgiving someone else. Yeah." She looked up at me. "I'm trying to forgive myself for what I let happen." I put a hand on her shoulder. "I know. And can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know my answer. I did. But because I wanted to be sure she'd truly hear it. Finally, I nodded. "I do." She cried. Not loud, heaving sobs. Just quiet tears that she didn't wipe away, like she was letting them fall for the first time without shame. And in that moment, I realized something. Revenge had already done its job. It didn't give me back what I lost. It gave me back me. Months later, as I stood on a small stage at a community event, sharing pieces of my story with an audience of strangers who understood far more than they revealed, I realized something else. Revenge wasn't the ending. It was the turning point. The ending was peace. And when the event wrapped, when the applause faded, when I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I felt it fully for the first time. Not anger, not resentment, not triumph, just weightlessness. I walked to my car, pulled out my phone, and sent a message to our family group chat. Yes, it had been revived. "Dinner this weekend? I'll cook." Ava replied with a smile emoji. Max replied with, "Only if it's your garlic chicken." I smiled, slipping the phone back into my pocket. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt whole. Because in the end, revenge wasn't about tearing someone else down. It was about finally standing on solid ground myself. And the final line that settled in my mind, the one that felt right, the one that summed up everything, was simple. Sometimes you don't rise when people lift you up. Sometimes you rise when they finally let you fall. I still remember the first time I realized my family didn't see me as the main character in my own life. I was 15, sitting at the dinner table with my mom, stepdad, and his golden child of a son, Tyler. It was one of those ordinary nights where we were all supposed to be bonding over meatloaf and mashed potatoes. But instead of asking me about my first solo at the school concert, which I'd been nervously hyping up for days, the entire table was buzzing over Tyler's accidental touchdown in gym class. I just kept chewing in silence, pretending not to care. That night stuck with me not because it was particularly cruel, but because it was so normal, so painfully, regularly dismissive. My name's Jason. I'm 29 now, but back then, I was just a quiet teenager trying to keep the peace in a house that never quite felt like home. After my dad passed away when I was 10, my mom eventually remarried. Enter Greg, my stepfather, a man with a booming laugh, a perfectly trimmed beard, and a son who could do no wrong. Tyler was my age, only 3 months older, but you'd think he was 10 years ahead in life based on how Greg talked about him. "That boy's a natural leader," he'd say. Or, "Tyler's going places, just like his old man." Meanwhile, I was the kid who needed to step it up, or be more like Tyler. It wasn't always outright malicious. Sometimes, it was subtle, dismissive glances, backhanded compliments, or just a lack of interest in anything I cared about. But it added up. By high school, the dynamic was cemented. Tyler was the quarterback, the class clown, the guy who dated cheerleaders and got invited to every party. I was the quiet one, debate team, AP classes, part-time job at the bookstore. I didn't resent Tyler at first. Honestly, I didn't have time. I was too focused on getting out. College was my way out, and I knew it. So I kept my head down, kept my grades up, and let him have the spotlight. Tyler wasn't cruel in the way movie bullies are. He didn't shove me into lockers or steal my lunch money. No, he was more calculated. Like when he accidentally wore the same outfit as me to school just to make a joke about who wore it better. Or the time he told everyone at Thanksgiving that I'd gotten rejected from my dream school, which wasn't true, and laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. My mom would always brush it off. Boys tease, she'd say, or don't be so sensitive, Jason. Greg, of course, would just chuckle and toss Tyler another serving of turkey. It wasn't until college that things started shifting. I got into a solid state university with a scholarship, while Tyler bounced between community college and what he called entrepreneurial ventures, which mostly meant failed dropshipping businesses and asking Greg for money. Still, whenever I came home for the holidays, he'd hold court like a mini celebrity. Even after his second suspension for cheating on an exam, Greg introduced him at a family barbecue as the next big tech mogul. I brought up my internship at a major finance firm and got a distracted, "That's nice, son," in response. I shouldn't have cared, but it still stung. Then came Becca. We met during my junior year of college. She was studying communications, smart, kind, and had a laugh that could cut through any bad day. We started as classmates, but it didn't take long before study sessions turned into dinner dates and coffee runs into weekend getaways. She was my person. The first time I brought her home, I was nervous. Not because of her. I knew she'd be graceful and kind, but because of them. My family had a way of souring things. And like clockwork, they did. Tyler was visiting that weekend. He showed up late to dinner, made a scene about his car troubles, and slid into the seat next to Becca like he owned it. He turned the charm up to 11, asking her questions, making jokes, leaning in just a bit too close. She handled it well, laughed politely, but I saw the way his eyes lingered when she stood to get water. I saw the smirk when she mentioned she was with me. I also saw the look Greg gave him afterward, some proud, masculine nod like, "Attaboy." After that dinner, I asked Becca if Tyler had made her uncomfortable. She shook her head. "He's harmless," she said. "Kind of full of himself, though." I let it go. I shouldn't have. Things were good for a while. After college, I landed a solid job at a financial firm. Worked my way up quietly while Tyler floundered in get-rich-quick schemes. He had a podcast for a while about crypto, then some NFT project that nearly got VC funding, which of course never materialized. Greg still bankrolled him, and my mom kept pretending not to notice the overdraft notices that came in the mail. Becca and I moved in together after a year of dating, and I was planning to propose by year 2. It felt like life was finally going my way. The night I proposed, I took her to the little coastal town we used to visit during college breaks. A cozy cabin, wine, and just the two of us under a starlit sky. She said yes, cried happy tears, and we spent the rest of the night dreaming about our future. Kids, houses, careers, all of it. For once, I let myself believe that I was the lucky one, that I had something Tyler couldn't touch. But I was wrong. It started with little things. Becca getting weird texts late at night and brushing them off as work messages. Her suddenly being too tired for our weekend plans. A few times, she mentioned running into Tyler, once at the gym, another time at a cafe by total coincidence. I didn't want to seem paranoid, so I said nothing. But a pit started growing in my stomach. Then, 3 months before the wedding, I came home early from work. Becca was in the kitchen, on the phone, whispering. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when I heard the words, "He doesn't suspect a thing," I froze. She hung up quickly when she saw me and forced a smile. "Hey babe, you're home early." I asked who she was talking to. She said it was a coworker, but her voice cracked just a bit. And that pit in my stomach? It turned into something sharp. The next day, I checked her phone while she was in the shower. I hated myself for it, but I needed the truth. And there it was. Messages between her and Tyler. Flirty at first, then explicit, then cruel. Things like, "Can't wait till we don't have to sneak around anymore. And he's so boring, isn't he?" My hands shook as I scrolled, reading months of betrayal laid out in blue and gray bubbles. The worst one, a selfie of the two of them in my own apartment. Him in my hoodie, her in my shirt. My whole world collapsed in a single swipe. I didn't confront them. Not then. I needed time. I needed a plan. I quietly canceled the wedding venue, spoke to my lawyer, got my name off the lease, and disappeared from her life without a word. I blocked them both, moved cities, and started over. I buried the pain beneath work and ambition. I told myself revenge wasn't worth it. that I was better off without them. And for a while, I believed that. Until 5 years later, when Tyler walked into my office, looking like he hadn't slept in days. That's when everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon, overcast, drizzly, the kind of day that makes the whole city feel a little more tired than usual. I had just wrapped up back-to-back client calls and was grabbing a protein bar from my drawer when my assistant, Lauren, buzzed in. "Jason, there's a man here asking to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. He says his name is Tyler." I froze. The name hit me like a cold slap. I hadn't heard it spoken in years, not since I blocked his number, his socials, his very existence. I thought I'd exorcised him from my life. I'd moved cities, changed jobs, built something new from the ashes. I even told myself I was over it. I wasn't. "Tell him I'm not available," I said, my voice even. There was a pause. "Jason, I think you should see him. He looks rough." Rough didn't begin to cover it. When I finally stepped into the hallway and saw him sitting there on the sleek gray couch, he looked like a ghost of the man he used to be. Gaunt, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled blazer 2 sizes too big. He stood when he saw me, eyes wide with a mix of hope and humiliation. "Jason," he said, his voice cracking. I didn't respond. Just opened the door to the conference room and walked in. If he wanted a conversation, he could earn it. He followed. That moment, that single moment, was the culmination of years of silence, betrayal, and quiet rebuilding. And Tyler had no idea what was about to hit him. But to explain why seeing him like that hit so hard, I need to rewind. After I left Becca, I went dark. I moved to a new city, one where no one knew my name or my story, and started over. I poured everything into my work. Finance was my safe zone. Numbers didn't lie. People did. I took a job at a growing private equity firm and worked like a man possessed. While Tyler and Becca were playing house, I was pulling 80-hour weeks, chasing deals, and climbing the ladder so fast it gave people whiplash. Pain has a funny way of sharpening your focus. In 2 years, I was a partner. In 4, I was offered the chance to head up a new division, an acquisition arm that specialized in rescuing distressed companies with potential. I said yes. It meant long nights, big stakes, and the freedom to build something from the ground up. I built that arm like it was my legacy. And one of the companies we absorbed, quietly, through a chain of shell entities, was a struggling tech startup with bloated expenses and an even more bloated CEO who happened to be none other than Greg, my former stepfather. It was almost poetic. The company was floundering. Bad leadership, overpromises, underdelivery, and a golden boy heir waiting in the wings to take over and revolutionize everything. I didn't reveal myself when we acquired it. I had no need to. The numbers alone told the story. They were bleeding money, ignoring compliance, and one lawsuit away from collapse. We cleaned house. Greg was bought out with a token severance and an airtight non-compete clause. Tyler was never officially employed, just consulting from time to time, which meant when the company restructured and rebranded, he lost everything. Not just a job, but the future he'd been promised. I didn't even do it out of revenge. At least, not at first. But when I found out Tyler had moved back in with Greg after a messy divorce, when I learned from an old mutual friend that he was broke, jobless, and reeling from a failed crypto scam, I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing. Until he showed up at my office. He had no idea I owned the company he thought he was destined to run. That I had been the one who dismantled the throne he was supposed to inherit. And the fact that he was sitting across from me now, hat in hand, was surreal. But I didn't let it show. Not yet. "Why are you here?" I asked flatly. I didn't know you worked here," he said, glancing around. Someone told me this place was hiring for project managers. I figured I'd take a shot. I leaned back in the chair. "So you're looking for a job?" His face turned red. "Not from you, if that's what you're thinking. I didn't even know you were. I didn't plan this." I didn't respond. Just let the silence stretch until it made him squirm. "I messed up," he said finally. "I know I did. With Becca. With everything. But life's kicked me pretty hard these last few years. I'm just trying to get back on my feet." "You think this is rock bottom?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. "Tyler, you haven't even scratched the surface." He blinked. What's that supposed to mean? But I didn't answer. Because this wasn't the moment. Not yet. There were still layers to peel back. Still truths to be exposed. And something in me wanted him to sweat. The days after that visit were strange. I kept thinking about the past, about how Tyler's betrayal wasn't a single act, but a lifetime of entitlement. Becca was just the final blow, the tip of the iceberg. Growing up, he'd always taken what he wanted. Toys, attention, praise. Greg fed him this twisted narrative that the world owed him something, that success was his birthright. Meanwhile, I was taught to keep my head down and earn my place. And when Becca came into the picture, he saw her as just another prize. I never told anyone this, but the wedding invite? It wasn't just mailed. It was hand-delivered. 3 weeks after I vanished from Becca's life, Tyler showed up at my old apartment. I hadn't updated the address yet. My neighbor passed the envelope to my landlord, who called me in confusion. Some guy came by, he said it was important you get this. Inside was a glossy, gold-trimmed invitation to their wedding. No note, just a smug post it slapped on the front that read, "Thought you should see what you missed." I kept it, not out of sentimentality, but as fuel. That same day, I framed the invite and put it in my desk drawer. Every time I worked late, every time I felt like quitting, I'd look at that frame and remind myself why I was building what I was building. Not for revenge, but for self-respect. But now, with Tyler back in my life, even if by accident, the lines were starting to blur. That weekend, I drove back to my hometown for the first time in years. My mom had moved to a smaller house after the divorce. We hadn't spoken much. Our relationship had always been strained. She'd chosen Greg over me too many times to count. But when she opened the door and saw me standing there, her face crumbled. "Jason," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You look older." "Yeah," I said. "Life does that." We talked. Not about the past. Not yet. But I asked her how things were. She said she was lonely. That Greg had moved to Florida. That Tyler was a mess. "He always talks about you," she said quietly. "He says he wishes you two had stayed close." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Back at my hotel that night, I found myself staring at the ceiling, mind racing. Tyler wasn't just a brother who'd crossed a line. He was a symbol of everything I'd fought to escape: entitlement, arrogance, delusion. And now, he was knocking on my door, asking for scraps. And I realized something. He still had no idea what I was capable of. For a long time, I didn't know what rock bottom looked like. I always assumed it would be loud, some spectacular explosion, like catching Becca and Tyler in bed or losing everything I'd worked for overnight. But when it came, it was quiet. Still, like the air had been sucked out of my world, and all that was left was the slow, suffocating silence. After I found those texts, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, listening to the water running in the bathroom. She was humming. Becca was humming. I remember thinking, how can she sound so normal? How could she be in there, brushing her teeth and humming like our lives weren't crumbling in real time? I didn't confront her that night, or the next. Instead, I pulled away slowly. Methodically, I started sleeping on the couch under the excuse of late-night work. I canceled our wedding venue through a private email, contacted the vendors, got deposits back where I could. She thought I was just stressed. She chalked it up to nerves, pressure, work, anything but the truth. The part that gutted me most? I still loved her. Even after seeing her betray me, my heart didn't get the memo that she was gone, that she'd already picked someone else. So I went numb. On a Tuesday morning, while she was at a work conference, I packed a single suitcase. I left the ring on the kitchen counter, next to the framed photo of us in Central Park. And then I walked out. I blocked her number on the train ride to a new city. Changed emails. I even deactivated my social media. I left no note, no forwarding address. I wanted to disappear before I collapsed. And I did collapse. My first month in the city, I lived out of a dingy sublet with peeling paint and a broken heater. I didn't eat much. I didn't talk to anyone. Just woke up, went to work, came home, and stared at the ceiling. Over and over. I had a job at a mid-tier finance firm. Stable, boring, lifeless. I didn't care. I just needed routine. Something to hold on to. There were days I didn't shower. Days I forgot to eat. Nights I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, convinced Becca and Tyler were standing at the foot of my bed, laughing. I couldn't go home. Not to my mom, who'd always treated Tyler like the sun and me like a shadow. She'd probably find a way to blame me for the breakup. Maybe if you'd been more romantic. I could already hear her saying. So I suffered alone. But rock bottom has this funny way of showing you who you really are. One night, I was walking home from work late, past the bakery on 6th that always left their day-olds in a crate outside. I stopped, grabbed a croissant, and sat on the cold stone steps of a closed bookstore. I didn't have headphones. Didn't even check my phone. I just sat, chewing, watching people go by. That's when I saw this older man in a wrinkled gray suit pacing under the flickering streetlight. He looked lost, tired. At one point he stopped, looked around like he'd forgotten where he was, and then kept moving. And for some reason, I thought, that's going to be me if I don't get it together. I threw away the croissant, stood up, and walked straight to the 24-hour gym 2 blocks away. I paid the sign-up fee, got a membership, and started working out at midnight, every night, for a month. Not because I wanted to look better, but because I needed to feel something again. I needed the burn, the ache, the slow return of control. It was small at first. An extra 5 pounds on the bench, a faster mile, a slightly better posture in the mirror. But every tiny win reminded me I was still here, still fighting. Work became my next obsession. I stayed late, volunteered for every project, and studied financial models until my eyes blurred. I found patterns others missed, cleaned up client portfolios like a machine. Within 6 months, I was promoted. Not because I was friendly, God knows I wasn't, but because I was relentless. I also started reading again. Books I used to love but had forgotten about. Business memoirs, psychology, negotiation strategies. I filled notebooks with scribbled ideas, diagrams, investment theses. I taught myself how to code financial analysis scripts to speed up my work. Slowly, I started piecing together a new identity, not as someone defined by what he'd lost, but by what he was becoming. That's when I met Alan. He was a senior partner at a competing firm, visiting ours for a joint project. Sharp guy, mid-50s, silver hair, direct eye contact. We were paired on a due diligence team, and after the first meeting, he pulled me aside and said, "You see numbers like other people see colors." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He invited me out to dinner a week later, asked me questions about my background, what I wanted. I told him I didn't know, that I'd had a rough year, that I was just surviving. He nodded and said, "You're not surviving. You're sharpening." A month later, he offered me a job at his new private equity firm, a boutique outfit with big ambitions and a lean, hungry team. He gave me a seat at the table, not because of my resume, but because he saw the fire I didn't even know was visible. And for the first time in my life, someone believed in me without needing me to be Tyler. The job was brutal at first. High stakes, high pressure. We were buying distressed companies and flipping them into profitability, sometimes with just months to pull it off. I traveled constantly, slept on planes, ate like garbage. But I was learning, evolving. We weren't just fixing businesses, we were rebuilding them from the inside. And somewhere along the way, I realized I was doing the same thing to myself. I started dressing better. Tailored suits, clean cuts, not because I cared about appearances, but because I wanted to see myself as someone who mattered, someone with weight. I reconnected with a therapist, unpacked years of resentment. My dad's death, Greg's constant favoritism, my mom's quiet indifference, Tyler's smug entitlement, Becca's betrayal. I felt invisible, I told her once. She nodded. So you made yourself undeniable. 2 years into the new job, I was leading deals on my own. I negotiated a $12 million acquisition with a boardroom full of men twice my age, and walked out with the paperwork signed and a congratulatory whiskey in hand. 3 years in, I was given control over a new division, focused entirely on strategic turnarounds. And in our 4th year, that division acquired Greg's company. I didn't push for it. It landed on my desk like fate. A failing tech firm trying to pivot to app-based logistics. Terrible numbers. Even worse leadership. But the bones were good. With the right strategy, we could make something out of it. I ran the numbers. Built the case. Got approval. It was just another file in a stack until I saw the founder's name. Gregory Allen. And listed under advisors. Tyler Allen. I laughed. Out loud. Alone in my office. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. We bought the company, gutted leadership, and restructured everything. Greg was ousted with a handshake and a modest buyout. Tyler wasn't even given that. He was never formally on the payroll. He had no equity. Nothing to negotiate with. It was done. I thought that was the end of it. Until Tyler walked into my office. And now? Now I had to decide what came next. Because he wasn't just a failed brother or a messy ex's new mistake. He was standing in front of the man he'd mocked, humiliated, and written off, desperate, broke, and clueless. He had no idea that everything he'd taken for granted now belonged to me. And I wasn't done yet. Tyler showing up at my office wasn't just a coincidence. It was a signal. A signal that the past, no matter how buried, always finds a way back. And now that it had, I wasn't going to waste the opportunity. After he left that day, tail between his legs, still unaware I owned the company he'd once been groomed to inherit, I sat in my office and stared at the framed wedding invite on my bookshelf. The same one he'd smugly delivered 5 years ago. That stupid gold trim, the swirly cursive font. Jason, the post-it note had read, "Just so you know what you missed." I leaned back in my chair and whispered to no one, "It's my turn now." I didn't want to humiliate him in the street or scream at him in public. That's what he would have done. I wanted something cleaner, sharper. A revenge that didn't just sting, it rewrote the entire story. A slow, surgical correction of every page he'd tried to tear out of my life. Step 1. Information. I called Lauren, my assistant, into the room and asked her to discreetly run a full background check on Tyler Allen. Employment history, credit score, criminal record, social media presence, everything. She didn't ask why. She knew me well enough by now. When I got quiet like this, it meant someone was in my crosshairs. By the next morning, the file was on my desk. Tyler was in worse shape than I thought. Bankruptcy declared last year. Over $100,000 in credit card debt. An abandoned LLC that hadn't filed taxes in 3 years. Evicted from his last apartment. He was living out of a tiny rental in a bad part of town, driving a rusted-out Jeep that hadn't passed inspection in 2 years. No job history in the last 18 months. The only gig on his resume was freelance crypto consulting, which meant absolutely nothing. But here's where it got interesting. He'd been reaching out to a dozen startups in the past 2 months, trying to leverage his last name, his vision, whatever scraps of credibility he had left. He was pitching an app, a delivery service with some vague blockchain twist. It was a mess, full of buzzwords and typos. But it had one clear goal, to secure enough angel funding to crawl out of the hole he'd dug. It was exactly the kind of desperate gamble a man like him would cling to. So I decided to bite. But not as Jason. Instead, I created a new identity. Brandon Kerr, an investor from Austin with a passion for disruptive logistics startups. I set up a LinkedIn, bought a burner phone, and used one of our shell holding companies to make it all look legitimate. A few emails later, and Brandon Kerr was scheduling a coffee meeting with Tyler Allen. I met him at a trendy cafe downtown. Wore jeans, a vest, some startup bro glasses. Just enough polish to look legit, but casual enough to disarm him. When he walked in, his eyes darted around nervously, like he thought someone might recognize him. He didn't recognize me. Not with the beard I'd grown out, the weight I'd lost, or the fake southern drawl I put on just enough to sell the character. He walked right up to me and shook my hand like we'd never met. "Tyler Allen," he said, forcing a confident smile. "Brandon," I replied. "Pleasure's mine, man." He launched into his pitch immediately. No slides, no prep, just words. Buzzwords, mostly. On-demand logistics, last-mile disruption, tokenized driver incentives. It was all fluff. I let him talk for 20 minutes while I sipped my coffee and nodded like I was impressed. Finally, I cut in. "I like it," I said. "But I'm not gonna lie, Ty. Can I call you Ty? This thing's risky. And I only invest when I can bring in someone who can actually run the ops side." He leaned in. "I'm open to bringing in a partner." I smiled. "You ever heard of Keystone?" He frowned. "The investment firm?" "Yeah," I said. "I've got a contact there. Think they might be interested in a joint venture. But only if you've got a clean slate. You got any skeletons in the closet, Ty?" He hesitated. "Nothing serious," he lied. I nodded slowly. "All right. I'll reach out to my guy. See if we can set something up. You got a deck?" He didn't. Of course he didn't. "I'll work on it tonight," he said quickly. "Get it to you by tomorrow." I stood up and clapped him on the shoulder. "Now we're talking." As I walked away, I didn't look back. That night, I reached out to our legal team and gave them a new project. Create a holding company that would appear to be a venture partner interested in investing in Tyler's app. Nothing real. Just a shell. A baited hook. I also had my team set up a fake corporate email domain, complete with titles like Head of Strategy and Due Diligence Director, all staffed by trusted colleagues who knew how to play along. We called it Griffin Partners. Step 2, the setup. Over the next 2 weeks, I had Griffin Partners engage with Tyler like he was the next big thing. We requested a full proposal, financials, projections, a rollout plan. He delivered half-baked spreadsheets and laughable revenue models, but we acted like they were gold. I even had our analyst suggest that we could potentially offer him a $200,000 signing bonus once the paperwork cleared. Tyler took the bait. Hard. He started name-dropping us on LinkedIn, revived his dormant Twitter account, sent emails to former contacts saying big things were coming. I watched from behind the curtain as he rebuilt his ego on a foundation of smoke and mirrors. But I wasn't done. Step 3. The mirror. I scheduled a formal meeting between Griffin Partners and Tyler to finalize the term sheet. We booked a conference room in one of our downtown buildings, sleek, modern, intimidating. I made sure the receptionist called me the moment Tyler arrived. I walked into the room with two of my real team members, Lauren, and one of our junior partners, Malik. Both briefed, both ready. Tyler stood when we entered. His face was pale, nervous but excited. And then he saw me. Not Brandon. Me. Jason. There was a silence so sharp it hurt. His eyes widened. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again like a fish gasping on dry land. I took a seat across from him and slid the wedding invitation across the table. Thought you should see what you missed. Lauren let out the softest laugh. Malik raised an eyebrow. Tyler looked like he might pass out. This is a joke, he stammered. It's not, I said. Griffin Partners isn't real. Your app isn't viable. And the only reason you're sitting here is because I wanted you to. His voice cracked. Why? I leaned forward, slow and calm. Because 5 years ago, you handed me this, I said, tapping the invite. You stole my fiancé, my dignity, my peace, and you wanted me to watch you celebrate it. He looked away. So now, I continued, I wanted you to feel what it's like to hope again, to build something in your head, to taste it, and then lose it. I let the silence settle. This meeting's over. As I stood up, I reached into my folder and placed one final document on the table, a printout of his personal financial statement, with the Griffin logo watermarked across the top and the words "Do not proceed" stamped in red. He didn't move, didn't say a word, and I walked out without looking back. But this wasn't over, because I had one final move to make. For a few weeks after that meeting, I didn't hear a word from Tyler. No calls, no emails, no veiled social media posts, just silence. At first, I thought maybe he'd gotten the message, that the fantasy was over, that the game was up, that for once in his life, he'd accepted a consequence without trying to slither out of it. But Tyler had always been allergic to accountability. I should have known better. He resurfaced one afternoon in the most Tyler way possible, publicly, and with just enough arrogance to make it embarrassing. I was scrolling through LinkedIn during a short break between meetings when I saw it. A post from a newly formed startup called Drive Chain Solutions, founded by visionary entrepreneur Tyler Allen. The post was an amateur mock-up of a delivery app interface, complete with pixelated graphics, buzzwords galore, and a caption that read, "After months of silence, I'm finally ready to show the world what I've been building. Haters gonna hate. But real ones know, when you're built different, you never stay down for long." It had 2 likes and 1 comment from his mom. I almost laughed. Almost. But then I noticed something that stopped me cold. In the list of advisors on the company's About page was my name. Not Jason Allen, but Brandon Kerr. He'd taken the fake investor I created and plastered him all over the site to give himself credibility. There was even a fake testimonial beneath a stock headshot I'd used. Tyler's vision is the future. I'd stake my firm on it. Brandon Kerr, Griffin Partners. He'd used my own lie to prop himself up. And just like that, the final domino fell into place. I was done playing nice. The first call I made was to my legal team. Within 24 hours, we'd served Tyler with a cease and desist for misusing the Griffin Partners brand, likeness, and fabricated endorsements. It was airtight. Even though Griffin wasn't technically a real firm, it was backed by a legitimate holding company under our corporate umbrella, giving us full legal standing. But I didn't stop there. Next, I made a quiet call to an old friend from my undergrad years, Sarah McConnell, now a senior editor at a rising tech media outlet. I gave her the tip of a lifetime, a startup scam story featuring a once promising founder who was using fake investors, non-existent partnerships, and buzzword-laced nonsense to drum up funding from unsuspecting backers. I sent her everything, screenshots, fake testimonials, domain records, the original pitch deck Tyler had emailed me while pretending I was Brandon. Every lie, every exaggeration, every pathetic attempt at legitimacy. She smelled blood in the water and went after it like a shark. Within a week, her article dropped. The startup that was never real. Inside DriveChain's fabricated foundation. It spread like wildfire. Tech Twitter ran with it. LinkedIn lit up. Reddit tore it apart piece by piece. Tyler's name trended locally for all the wrong reasons. Within hours, the DriveChain website was taken down. The domain went dark. His LinkedIn vanished. And then came the fallout. Turns out Tyler had convinced two small-time investors to give him seed money, $25,000 each, based on the promise that Griffin Partners was involved. They'd seen my name and Brandon Kerr's on the website and thought it checked out. When the article broke, both investors lawyered up and filed fraud claims. One of them went straight to the state attorney general's office. I didn't even have to lift a finger. Greg, his father, my old stepdad, called my mother in a panic. I wasn't there, obviously, but I heard later from her voicemail, which she left half intentionally, half passive-aggressively, that he was furious. "He's ruining Tyler's life," Greg had said. "Your son's always had a chip on his shoulder. I knew he'd come for us eventually. Come for us. Like I was the aggressor. Like I hadn't been cleaning up the messes they left behind for years." That voicemail was the final nail in the coffin for me and my mother. I called her back only once. "I didn't ruin Tyler's life," I told her. "He did that all on his own. I just held up a mirror." She didn't respond. Not then. Not in the weeks that followed. I think, deep down, she knew. Maybe for the first time in her life, she understood just how badly she'd chosen. How many times she'd picked comfort and favoritism over fairness. Over her own son. But I didn't need her validation anymore. I had something better. About 2 months later, I was hosting a private investor event for one of our new portfolio companies, an innovative logistics firm that was already disrupting the very market Tyler had tried and failed to enter. The event was swanky, hosted on a rooftop in Midtown, filled with suits and power players. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about the man standing in the lobby downstairs. Tyler had shown up. He wasn't on the guest list. He wasn't invited. But somehow he'd heard about the event. And in his usual fashion, he tried to bluff his way in. "I'm with Griffin," he'd told the receptionist. But the receptionist had been trained. She smiled sweetly, called security, and then called me. "Do you want us to escort him out?" she asked. I stared out at the skyline for a moment. "No," I said. "Let him up." A few minutes later, he was stepping off the elevator, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie undone. There were dark circles under his eyes. "Jason," he said, his voice low. I gestured to an empty barstool beside me. He didn't sit. "I lost everything," he whispered. "Investors are threatening lawsuits. My credit's shot. I'm blacklisted from every startup incubator in the state." I nodded slowly. "I know. I didn't know it was you," he said, his voice cracking. "Brandon Kerr. Griffin. All of it. I thought I could fake it till I made it." I turned to face him. Calm. Steady. "You faked it at my expense," I said. "You took something from me. Someone I loved. And you wanted me to suffer for it." He swallowed hard. "That was a long time ago." "Yeah," I said. "And I've spent every day since building something real." "You spent it chasing shortcuts." There was silence. Then, with a shaky breath, he said, "Can you help me?" I stared at him. At the man who once laughed in my face, who once sat at my family's dinner table and soaked up praise while I was invisible. And I said, "No." I turned away. He didn't speak again, just stood there for a long moment, then walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and vanished. That was the last time I saw him. It's been a year since then. DriveChain never recovered. Tyler filed for personal bankruptcy again, and as far as I know, he's doing odd jobs under the table to avoid debt collectors. Greg moved to a retirement community in Florida. My mother still sends the occasional card, but I don't respond. I'm engaged again now, to someone kind, grounded, and honest. Someone who doesn't live in shadows or hide behind charm. She knows the whole story. I told her everything. And one day, when we were packing up boxes to move into our new place, she found the old wedding invitation. Tyler and Becca's. She held it up, confused. "You want to keep this?" I looked at it for a long time. Then I smiled. "No," I said. "Let's throw it out." She tossed it in the bin. And just like that, the last ghost was gone. I stood by the window after she left the room, looking out at the city I'd rebuilt myself in. I thought about who I'd been, who I'd become, and what it took to get here. And in that quiet moment, I realized something I wish I'd known a decade earlier. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming untouchable. I still remember the sound of my dad's fist slamming down on the kitchen table. It was sharp and loud, like the crack of a bat hitting a baseball, and for a second, I just stared at him, not even flinching. His face was red, eyebrows clenched in that way he always did when he wanted to feel powerful. And then came the words, those perfect little daggers wrapped in entitlement and anger. You'd be homeless without us. Just like that. No hesitation. No shame. That was the moment something inside me shifted. But before I get to that night, before everything boiled over and fell apart, I should probably start at the beginning. My name's Lucas. I'm 27, and I grew up in a family where love always had a price tag. I'm the oldest of 3, and from a young age, I was treated more like an unpaid intern than a son. My parents, especially my dad, believed that respect was earned, but obedience was demanded. And if you were the oldest, well, then your obedience had interest on top. You were expected to set the example, keep the peace, hold things together even when nobody else lifted a finger. Growing up, I thought this was normal. That all parents guilt-tripped their kids into cleaning the house while calling it teaching responsibility, or made them pay rent at 17 because life doesn't give handouts. We weren't poor. Far from it. My dad worked in construction management, and my mom had a remote admin job for a legal firm. We lived in a 2-story house in the suburbs, had a decent backyard, and always had enough for birthday parties, new clothes, and dinners out. But they had this mindset, this obsession with hardening us for the real world. Only, that hardness was always directed at me. My siblings? Not so much. My brother Tyler, 2 years younger, could crash his car into a mailbox and somehow be the victim in the story. My sister Ella, still in high school, had a room full of electronics I couldn't even dream of affording at her age. Meanwhile, I had to fight to get Wi-Fi that worked in my basement room, which I paid rent for, $400 a month, to be exact. I started working when I was 15. First, it was a part-time gig at a local grocery store bagging groceries. Then I moved to stocking shelves at a department store while I finished high school. My parents made it clear that if I wanted a car, gas money, or anything beyond the bare minimum, it was on me. When I got my license, I used my savings to buy a rusted-out 2002 Toyota Corolla. My dad smirked and said, "Looks like you're finally learning how the real world works." I thought he was proud of me. But in hindsight, I think he just liked the idea of me struggling. It reinforced his belief that the world was cruel and that kids should man up early. After high school, I didn't go straight to college. I didn't have the money, and my parents weren't offering. If you want a degree, my dad said, get a job that pays for it. Or take loans. You're not living here for free while you figure yourself out. So I worked. Warehouse jobs, night shifts, delivery gigs, anything to keep paying my rent and saving a little bit at a time. Eventually, I started doing IT certifications online. I taught myself networking, server admin, and cybersecurity basics. It wasn't easy, especially working 40-plus hours a week while trying to study, but I made it work. By the time I was 24, I landed a full-time remote job doing tech support and network management for a mid-sized company. It didn't pay 6 figures, but it was stable, and it was mine. I finally had a little breathing room. I was still living in the basement, still handing over rent like clockwork, and still getting passive-aggressive comments every time I missed a family dinner because of overtime. But at least I wasn't scrambling anymore. I started thinking about moving out, getting my own place, maybe even going back to school part-time to finish a degree. Then the pandemic hit. Suddenly, Tyler lost his job as a bar back and moved back home. My parents, who'd always insisted I pay rent because life's not fair, decided he didn't need to contribute. He's going through a lot, my mom said. It's not the time to add pressure. Ella, now taking classes online from home, started sleeping till noon and blasting TikToks at full volume through the walls. Meanwhile, I kept working, still paying rent, still contributing to groceries, still getting guilt-tripped every time I asked for some quiet during Zoom meetings. It was like being a guest in a hotel I was secretly funding. Except the staff hated me and the other guests got room service. It got worse when Tyler started making jabs about my job. Must be nice to work in your pajamas, he'd sneer while drinking the coffee I bought. Or, some of us have real jobs, Lucas. Physical labor, not mouse clicking. My dad would chuckle like it was some inside joke. He's not wrong, he said once. If the power goes out, what are you going to do? You're not exactly essential. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just nodded and kept going. One night, I came upstairs after a long shift. I'd been putting out fires all day, server crashes, phishing attacks, 2 coworkers out sick. I was fried. I just wanted to make a sandwich and watch something mindless. But when I opened the fridge, half the stuff I'd bought was gone. My protein shakes, my chicken, my prepped meals. Gone. I turned around to see Tyler on the couch, shirtless, burping up what I knew was my food. "You're welcome," he said without looking away from the TV. I asked him, calmly, at first, why he kept taking my groceries when he didn't contribute anything. He just laughed. "What's mine is yours, bro. That's what family's for." I brought it up to my parents that night at dinner. Not accusingly, not even angrily. I just asked if we could set some boundaries. Maybe label food, make a schedule, something. That's when my dad slammed his hand on the table. "You're acting like a damn guest in your own home," he snapped. "You think you're better than your brother because you've got some desk job and a certificate? You'd be homeless without us. You live here because we allow you to. Don't forget that." I didn't say a word. Not then. I just stood up, walked to the basement, closed the door, and sat on my bed for a long time. Something about that night felt different. It wasn't the first time my dad had pulled that card. But this time, it didn't sting the same way. It didn't feel like failure. It felt like clarity. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't staying here much longer. But if I was going to leave, I wasn't going to leave quietly. And I definitely wasn't going to keep funding their lives while they treated me like an afterthought. So I started planning. And 2 months later, when the lights flickered off in the middle of their movie night and their credit cards started getting declined left and right, they finally realized something was wrong. But by then, I was already gone. And what I did before I left? Well, let's just say they weren't expecting that. I didn't leave the next day. I wanted to. After my dad's outburst at dinner, something in me felt cracked wide open, like I'd finally woken up from years of trying to earn their respect, trying to be the good son who paid rent, cooked meals, did the yard work, and smiled through the disrespect like it was just part of growing up. But when I sat in my basement room that night, staring at the gray concrete wall next to my desk, I realized I needed a plan, not just an escape. Leaving wasn't just about packing a bag. My name was on more things than I liked to admit. The family Wi-Fi? Under my name. Electricity bill? Split in my online account. But I was the only one actually paying it on time. The streaming services? All on my cards. The food in the fridge? Mine, half of it gone within a day. At some point, without even noticing, I had become a crutch for the whole house. Financially, emotionally, logistically, and it wasn't like they noticed. The next morning, I woke up to Ella stomping around upstairs. Apparently, her AirPods had gone missing. I climbed the stairs and walked into a full-blown interrogation. "Did you take them?" she asked, standing in the hallway with her arms crossed, glaring at me like I was a suspect in a crime drama. I blinked. "Why would I take your AirPods?" "I don't know. Maybe because I borrowed your speaker last week and never gave it back and you got mad about it?" I stared at her. That was her logic. She wronged me. So now I must be retaliating? "I didn't take anything. Ask Tyler." She scoffed and walked away, muttering something under her breath that sounded a lot like freak. I didn't even flinch. Later that day, I got a Venmo request from my mom. $48.67 for household groceries. No explanation. No prior discussion. Just a demand in the form of a payment request. And the best part? I had already done the grocery run 2 days earlier and spent $80 of my own money on essentials. Eggs, milk, chicken, soap, stuff no one thanked me for, stuff I watched disappear in record time. I declined the request. 30 minutes later, I got a text. "MOM, did you decline the payment on purpose?" Me, yes. "MOM, that's not okay, Lucas. We all have to contribute." Me, I do contribute. I just bought groceries. "MOM, that was your choice. This is for the stuff I bought." Me, I didn't ask for any of it. And no one offered to split mine. She didn't respond after that. But that night, during dinner, there was a different energy. Colder. My mom didn't speak to me. My dad cleared his throat aggressively every few minutes like he was itching to say something, but trying to hold back. Ella had her phone out, and took photos of the mashed potatoes, probably to post some fake family bonding story. And then Tyler decided to play the role of provocateur. "I heard you're not paying Mom back," he said casually, stabbing at his chicken. I didn't answer. Kind of low, considering she raised you. Still, I stayed silent. "Lucas," my dad said, voice sharp. "Answer your brother." "I'm not answering anyone at this table like it's a courtroom," I replied. "You're under our roof," my dad snapped. "We ask, you answer." I stood up. "Then maybe I won't be under your roof much longer." My mom finally spoke. "Where are you going to go, Lucas? You think you're ready to be on your own? Everything you have is because of us." And there it was. Because of us. Like my job, my savings, my sleepless nights studying while they slept upstairs. None of it counted. Like I'd been given a scholarship to life, and they were the generous donors. I didn't say another word. I left the table and walked straight back downstairs. That night, I started pulling numbers. I looked at my bank account, calculated what it would take to get a small apartment, started browsing listings for studio rentals on the other side of town. I called a couple of friends, quietly, cautiously, just to ask about their buildings, about availability. I created a checklist: transfer Wi-Fi, remove autopays, separate my cards from the bills. I knew it would take a few weeks to untangle myself, but I was determined to do it right. To leave clean, silent, without burning a bridge, but without ever walking back across it. The next week, I started slowly transferring utilities out of my name. I contacted the internet provider and told them I was moving. They gave me a cutoff date. 2 weeks. Perfect. Electricity? I emailed the company, removed myself as a primary user, and let the account default to the household. My dad would receive the next bill. He'd figure it out eventually. Meanwhile, life upstairs went on as usual. Tyler continued eating my groceries. Ella borrowed my headphones and never gave them back. My mom sent me another Venmo request, $23.14 this time. I ignored it. Then came the boiling point. It was a Thursday evening. I'd been in meetings most of the day, and I came upstairs just as dinner was wrapping up. I wasn't expecting food. At this point, I was cooking my own meals anyway, but I noticed something odd. Laughter. The kind I hadn't heard in a while. That strange, fake family joy that only surfaced when something juicy was happening. My dad was sitting at the head of the table, grinning. Tyler was scrolling on his phone. My mom had a smug little smile, and Ella was whispering to her from across the table. As I walked into the kitchen, I saw the envelope. It was open. My name was on the front. I picked it up and saw the logo of my company. My recent pay stub. They had opened my mail. I froze. My chest tightened, heart thudding in that way it does when you feel like you're being watched. "Lucas," my dad said, "you didn't tell us you were making that much." I looked at him, then at the opened envelope. I didn't say anything. "Maybe you should be paying a little more rent," he continued, smug. "We're all struggling here." I looked at my mom. "You opened my mail?" She had the audacity to shrug. "It came to our house. It had my name on it. We were just curious," Tyler added. "Relax. It's not like we hacked your bank account." "You crossed a line," I said, my voice quiet but hard. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," my dad snapped. "We've supported you your whole life. You think you can keep secrets from us now?" I stepped back. My fists clenched, not in anger, but in something deeper. Something final. There was no coming back from this. They had invaded my privacy, laughed at my success, and now they were using it as ammunition against me. That's when the idea finally solidified in my mind. Not just to leave, but to really leave. To take everything I'd given them and pull it back like a tablecloth from under their feet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just nodded. And I said, "Okay." They all looked at me, confused. "What does that mean?" my mom asked. "It means you're right," I said, stepping away. "I shouldn't keep secrets from you." And then I walked out of the room. But what I didn't say was that I had already found a place, that I had already signed a lease, that in 3 days, I was moving out and taking every single thing I had paid for with me. And when the bills started bouncing and the fridge was empty and their Amazon Prime stopped working, they'd realize exactly what I meant. But I wasn't done yet, because there was one more thing I was going to do before I left, something they would never see coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling with the dull hum of the server fan beside my desk keeping me company. My mind replayed everything. My dad's smirk, Tyler's laugh, my open mail lying on the counter like it belonged to everyone but me. There was this heaviness in my chest, the kind that didn't come from sadness exactly, but from exhaustion. Years of trying to keep the peace, trying to be the strong one, the provider, the fixer. All of it had chipped away at me until there was barely anything left to give. And now they wanted more. 3 days. That was all I had to get everything ready. I'd already signed the lease on a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Second floor. Older building. The kind of place you wouldn't look twice at from the street, but it was clean, quiet, and, most importantly, mine. No basement. No passive-aggressive sighs through the ceiling. No family meetings disguised as interventions. Just a space where my things stayed where I left them, and my paychecks belonged to me. But I couldn't just walk out the front door. That would be too easy. I had to move quietly, methodically. If they sensed something was coming, they'd try to sabotage it. Maybe not directly, but in those subtle little ways they'd perfected over the years. Lucas, we need your help with this bill. Lucas, can you drive Ella to school? Lucas, the Wi-Fi's down. Can you call them again? Just enough to slow me down. Just enough to keep me useful. So I moved in silence. On Friday, I scheduled the Wi-Fi to shut off Monday morning. Canceled the streaming services that I paid for, Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, all of it. They were all linked to my email. They wouldn't even know why they were gone until the "Who's watching" screen failed to load. I stopped the auto pay on the electricity and gas. I switched my Amazon account to a pickup locker near my new apartment. I even swapped the billing address on my debit card. No more shared mailboxes. Saturday, I packed slowly. A little at a time. A few books here. My hard drive's there. I boxed up my monitor and left my backup one hooked up so it wouldn't look suspicious. Every time I brought a load out to my car, I'd park a block away, just in case someone peeked out the window. I felt like I was sneaking out of a place I was never supposed to escape from. And then Sunday came. I left early, before anyone was up. Took the final load. Clothes. Tower. Kitchen supplies. The last thing I grabbed was a photo frame off my desk. It was a picture of me from graduation, cap crooked, smile uncertain. My parents stood behind me in that photo, arms on my shoulders. Back then, I thought that meant support. Now I saw it differently, like they were holding me down. I placed the frame face down on the desk, and then I drove. It took me less than 15 minutes to get to my new place, but those 15 minutes felt longer than the last 15 years. Every stoplight was a countdown. Every turn was a step towards something bigger than just a new address. It was freedom, or at least the hope of it. When I opened the door to my apartment, it smelled like paint and dust. The furniture I ordered wasn't arriving until Tuesday, so for now, it was just me, 2 boxes, and a mattress I bought secondhand. But it was quiet, peaceful. I could hear the distant sound of a dog barking in the courtyard. Someone upstairs was watching a basketball game. I didn't mind. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't minefield silence. It was normal. I sat on the floor for a long time that day, leaning against the wall, laptop open, watching the sunlight crawl across the hardwood. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. But rebuilding doesn't happen in a single afternoon. That first week was rough. Emotionally, I mean. There's something terrifying about sitting alone in an empty apartment with no one to ask what's for dinner or how your day was. I wasn't used to silence that didn't have teeth. My mind kept flashing back to every conversation I ever had with my family where I let something slide. Every moment, I let them diminish me. Every time I thought, maybe if I just try a little harder, they'll see me. I realized something painful that week. They did see me. They just didn't value me. And that hurt more than I expected. By day 3, I caught myself reaching for my phone, half expecting to see a text from my mom asking if I was okay, or my dad offering some weird backhanded apology. But there was nothing. Just silence. Like I'd never existed in that house at all. It should have made me angry. Instead, it made me determined. I started working harder, smarter. I restructured my work hours, set up a better workstation, built out a new resume, just in case I wanted to climb somewhere new. I signed up for an online class, cybersecurity audit certification, something I'd put off for over a year. Without their noise in my head, I could think again. I was sleeping better, too. No more waking up to Ella's music or Tyler's gaming chair creaking at 3 a.m. Every little win started to feel bigger. Cooking my own meals. Managing my own schedule. Watching a movie without someone barging in. It sounds ridiculous, but freedom has a taste. And I was finally learning it. Then came the messages. They didn't realize I was gone until the power went out. First it was my mom. Lucas, the electricity's not working. Can you call the company? Lucas. We're sitting in the dark. Did you forget to pay it? I didn't reply. Then Tyler messaged. Tyler, bro. The Wi-Fi's down. What the hell? Tyler, are you even home? Tyler, mom's freaking out. Still, I said nothing. The next morning, I woke up to 6 missed calls and a voicemail from my dad. His voice was different, less sure of himself. That faux authority stripped down to uncertainty. Lucas, listen, we need to talk. Things have gotten a little complicated. There's been a misunderstanding, clearly. You can't just cut off everything like this. That's not how families work. Call me back. I stared at the phone. That's not how families work. And yet, they've been doing exactly that to me for years. Emotionally, financially, spiritually. The irony would have been funny if it didn't sting so much. A week passed. Then another. I stopped checking their messages. Focused on my classes. Improved my work metrics. My manager actually noticed and gave me a bonus. Said he liked the new energy I brought to the team. I smiled and said thank you. But inside, I knew the truth. I wasn't just working better. I was living better. Every day, I grew a little more distant from the version of myself that used to live in that basement. That version who kept asking why can't they love me the way I love them? The version who made himself smaller to keep the peace. The version who paid rent just to avoid being called ungrateful. He was gone now, and in his place was someone new. Someone who had just learned how powerful it is to be done. But the story doesn't end there. Because just when I thought I could finally move on, something happened. Something I didn't expect. Something that made me realize this wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about making sure they never treated someone else the way they treated me. And I had the power to do that. Because I knew things they didn't think I remembered. I had access to accounts they'd forgotten I managed. And when I checked my old inbox one random night out of curiosity, I saw an email thread that stopped me cold. An old forgotten chain between my dad and someone he owed money to. An account I used to be linked to. And buried in that thread was the real reason why he was so angry that I left. It wasn't just about the money I brought in. It was about the money he needed and the secret he'd been hiding for years. And suddenly, the game changed. They thought I just walked away. But I hadn't. I was just getting started. I sat at my desk in the new apartment, surrounded by the soft blue glow of dual monitors and a quiet that still didn't feel real. It had been almost a month since I left, and most days I felt like I was finally exhaling after years of holding my breath. But that night, after reading the email buried deep in my old inbox, I wasn't calm. I wasn't free. I was focused. The email was from nearly 2 years ago. A debt collection notice. My dad had used my name, my credit, to open a joint line of credit for a home improvement project he never completed. The balance was small back then, just under $3,000, but it had grown. Interest, missed payments, late fees. The collection agency had stopped emailing me directly because I had switched accounts, but my name had stayed on the debt. He hadn't removed it. He hadn't even told me. And now I knew why he was panicking after I left. It wasn't about me cutting off the Wi-Fi or canceling the Netflix subscription. It was about losing access to the person who was unknowingly tied to his financial mess. He hadn't just taken advantage of my presence. He'd built a safety net out of me. Quietly, selfishly, illegally. My hands shook as I clicked through the old thread. I had vague memories of signing something for the house when I was around 23, back when I was still working night shifts and hoping to move into the guest room upstairs. He told me it was just a paperwork formality to add value to the home. I was naive, tired, trusting, and I signed. Now I understood. My dad had tied me to a credit line without telling me what it really was. He hadn't made a single payment on it in over 6 months. And because I'd moved out and stopped forwarding my old email, I hadn't seen the new notices piling up. If I hadn't checked that inbox, I might have never known. But now I did. And that changed everything. I sat back, staring at the monitor, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part of me wanted to call him, demand answers, threaten legal action, force a confession. But I didn't. That wasn't me anymore. I wasn't interested in emotional outbursts. I was interested in strategy. So I made a plan. Step 1 was gathering everything. I printed the email thread, saved all the attachments, and pulled my credit report. There it was, right under Open Accounts. A joint revolving credit line with a balance of $6,882.47 and a credit utilization rate that made me wince. It was dragging my score down, quietly poisoning my financial future. He thought I wouldn't find out. He was wrong. I called the credit company the next day. Calm, polite, professional. Hi, I'm calling about a joint line of credit that was opened under my name. I need to request documentation and formally dispute the account. The representative paused. Are you saying you didn't authorize the account? I signed something under the impression it was for something else, I said carefully. I need to review the original application and statement of purpose. They sent it over within the hour. There it was. My signature, my social, my dad's handwriting filling in the rest. I called a friend of mine next. Kara. We hadn't spoken in a few months, but she worked in consumer advocacy law. When I explained the situation, she didn't sound surprised. This happens more than you think, she said, especially with families. Is it illegal? Gray area, depending on what you signed. But you can file a dispute. And if you're serious about pushing back, you can freeze your credit, request identity theft protection, and force the account to be re-reviewed. Would that affect him? She hesitated. If the account was only being paid by him, and you dispute your part, he'll be fully liable. And it'll trigger a full investigation into the missed payments. Could tank his credit. I nodded slowly. Good. Kara paused. Lucas, is this revenge? I smiled faintly. No. This is step one. She laughed softly. You always were the quiet type. Not anymore. I spent the next week compiling documents. Copies of every utility bill I'd paid for while living at home. Screenshots of every Venmo transfer to my mom. Text threads. Emails. I created a timeline. A paper trail that showed exactly how much I'd been contributing over the years, how deep my involvement ran, and how little appreciation I got in return. This wasn't just a petty tally sheet. It was proof. Of exploitation. Of dependence. Of intent. I wasn't going to sue them. Not yet. That wasn't the point. But I wanted leverage. Real leverage. Because while I could live with the way they treated me emotionally, I couldn't accept that they were sabotaging my credit and future behind my back. That crossed a line even they couldn't gaslight away. The next step was subtler. My mom still had me on her emergency contact list. For her job. For Ella's school. Even for the shared online calendar she used for family events. I started backing away from each of those. Quietly. I removed myself from every system I could think of. Her workplace? I emailed HR and rescinded my contact permission. Ella's school? I logged into the portal and deleted my access. Calendar? Blocked. Then came Tyler. He hadn't paid taxes in 2 years, and I knew, because I'd helped him file the year before last. He kept asking me to look over his stuff whenever April came around, but he never followed through. Now, I logged into the software we used, still under my email, and saw a draft return just sitting there. Untouched. No income reported. And I knew something he didn't. If you let a year go unfiled, and you then file a return that shows undeclared income, the IRS notices. Fast. So I submitted a quiet, anonymous tip through their reporting site. I wasn't trying to ruin his life. I was just cutting the cord. Then came Ella. She was too young to do anything damaging, but I knew she was using my old Spotify account, still logged in on her iPad. So I changed the password. Same with the Disney Plus account she used to stream her favorite shows. Logged everyone out. Changed the email. Set up 2-factor. She texted me the next day. Ella, did you log me out of Spotify? I ignored it. Ella, that's messed up. I ignored that too. 2 hours later, I got a message from my mom. Mom, what's going on with the accounts? I replied once. Me. I'm moving on. No response after that. Then, finally, came the confrontation. I got home late one Friday night from a grocery run. My apartment building is small, only 8 units, and there's no buzz-in system. Just a locked main door with old mailboxes stacked beside it. I was juggling bags when I saw a car pull up. Silver Honda. Familiar. My dad. He got out like he owned the place. I scanning until he spotted me. Lucas, he called. We need to talk. I didn't move. Just looked at him. He stepped closer. We made mistakes, okay? I get it. You're upset. But this disappearing act, this silent treatment, isn't fair. You don't get to abandon your family just because you had a bad week. I set the groceries down on the stoop. I didn't abandon anyone, I said quietly. I left a toxic situation. You left responsibilities, he shot back. You left things unfinished. No, I said. You left things unfinished when you used my name to open a credit line and never told me. When you let me pay your bills and never offered thanks. When you opened my mail and laughed at my income like it was yours. His jaw tightened. We're your family. And you treated me like a tool. He scoffed. You think you're the victim? You wouldn't have gotten half of what you have if it wasn't for us. No, I said, stepping past him. You wouldn't have survived the last 3 years if it wasn't for me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't even slam the door. But I could tell I hit him where it hurt. Because for the first time in my life, my dad looked speechless. And that was when I knew. He wasn't in control anymore. I was. And I wasn't done yet. Because the final step of my plan was going to hit them where it really mattered. Not emotionally. Not digitally. But legally. And I had just the thing in motion. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. I let it close behind me with the same calm finality I'd learned to carry in every interaction since I left that house. My dad stood outside the building, staring at the locked door like he couldn't quite believe it. Like the same son who used to take his lectures in silence and fix the Wi-Fi at midnight had just told him, plainly, to leave. And I had. The next morning, I brewed coffee in peace and sat at my desk with my laptop, the sunlight soft against my windowsill, and opened the final piece of the plan, the credit dispute form. I had already submitted my initial complaint and documentation weeks ago, but this was the final step. The fraudulent activity box, the sworn statement, the supporting evidence that my name was used without proper consent, that I had been misled under the guise of trust and family. It wasn't just about my credit score anymore. It was about making sure they couldn't do it again. I submitted it and sat back. Done. 2 weeks later, I got the email. The account had been flagged, my name removed, and all negative impact on my credit reversed. The balance? Reassigned solely to the other party on the account. My dad. He got the notice a few days later. I didn't hear about it directly, of course. But Kara texted me. Kara, did you just make someone cry at the bank? Me? Possibly. Apparently, he tried to take out a small loan, probably to cover some other overdue bill. Denied. Not just because of the missed payments, but because now, the full weight of the debt was on him. No shared liability. No fallback plan. He was furious. And powerless. Because this time, I wasn't there to fix it. And I wasn't done. I filed an identity protection affidavit with the IRS, flagged my name to prevent further unauthorized filings, and requested a review of any recent tax submissions tied to my social security number. I knew Tyler hadn't filed properly in years, and if he ever tried using my info again to access old documents or refund estimates, he'd hit a wall. Ella's school eventually called to verify the emergency contacts list. I told them to remove me permanently. I'm not available, I said, as politely as I could. If her legal guardians need support, they'll have to handle it themselves. It was the first time I said those words out loud. Legal guardians. Not my parents. Not my family. Just people. People I used to live with. The fallout came slowly after that. First, I got a series of desperate texts from my mom. Long ones. Emotional ones. Some guilt-tripping, some just confused. Mom, I don't understand what we did to deserve this. You were always so responsible, so kind. Now you've just disappeared. Mom, we're your parents. Doesn't that mean anything anymore? Mom, we're struggling here. Tyler hasn't found work. Ella's grades are slipping. Your father is under so much pressure. Please, just talk to us. I didn't reply, because I had talked. I'd tried for years. They just hadn't listened. The silence was the answer now. Eventually, the tone of the messages changed. Mom, we need your help. Just for a little while. You're doing well, we can tell. It's selfish to hoard success while your family suffers. Mom, don't think we won't tell people what you did. You left us in the dark, Lucas. People are asking questions. Don't make us say things we can't take back. Oh, there it was. Manipulation, right on schedule. Still, I said nothing. But I did one last thing. A few months prior, I had created a shared drive when I was still handling a lot of the family's tech stuff. Photos, tax files, scanned documents, receipts. It had grown into a kind of digital junk drawer that no one maintained, but everyone relied on. I logged in one final time and wiped everything except one folder. I titled it, Contributions. Inside it, I uploaded PDFs of every grocery receipt I ever paid for. Every rent payment transfer. Screenshots of me fixing bills. Screenshots of Ella's old homework I stayed up helping her with when my parents were out. Every job I helped Tyler apply to. Even a screen-recorded scroll through the email thread showing my dad opening that credit line with my name on it. I included a note. This is what I did for you. Not because you deserved it, but because I thought, for a long time, that love was earned through sacrifice. I don't think that anymore. I hope one day you understand what that means. Then I removed myself as a collaborator. I changed my number shortly after that. A few more weeks passed, and the silence stretched. I rebuilt in peace. My apartment slowly filled with furniture that didn't feel borrowed or temporary. A real bed frame, a dining table, a bookshelf filled with more than just tech manuals. I started hosting casual Friday movie nights with a couple of friends. I didn't have to ask permission. No one asked me to mute the volume or run errands first. I lived fully and quietly for the first time in my adult life. One night, I got a call from Kara. "Thought you should know," she said, voice laced with amusement. "Your dad filed a complaint. Claimed you misled the credit agency." I laughed softly. "Of course he did. What happened?" "They investigated and found no evidence of fraud. Your statement held. The documents were clear." "Let me guess," I said. "He didn't read the fine print." "Nope. And now he's officially blacklisted from applying for any new joint accounts with your info attached. Permanently." I thanked her and hung up. That was the moment I knew it was over. Not just the legal stuff, but the weight. The constant emotional math I used to justify staying connected to them. The guilt. The obligation. The hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd change if I gave them one more chance. They wouldn't. But I had. And that had to be enough. Months turned into a year. Then came a wedding invitation. Not mine, Tyler's. Apparently, he'd met someone. Someone with money. The kind of woman who didn't ask questions about past debts if you wore the right watch and talked big. I wasn't invited, of course. But one of our old family friends accidentally sent me a group photo from the reception. There they were, Mom, Dad, Ella, and Tyler, smiling for the camera. Except none of them were standing next to each other. They looked like four strangers who happened to be in the same room. It didn't bring me joy. Not really. But it did bring closure. They built a house out of expectations, control, and silence. And I walked out the front door. I didn't break the windows. I didn't set it on fire. I just turned off the lights and left. And when they realized how much of their comfort depended on me, they called in the dark. But I didn't answer. Because some homes are only homes when you hold the key. And I wasn't coming back. "My name's Jason, I'm 38, and up until 3 days ago, I thought I had a pretty solid grip on my life. I co-own a mid-sized tech firm with 2 college friends. I've been married for 6 years to a woman I was sure was my best friend, and I genuinely believed I was building a future that mattered, with someone who actually cared if I was part of it. We didn't have kids yet, though her parents kept hinting, 'You're not getting any younger,' her mother would say while dishing out mashed potatoes with that tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. I used to laugh it off. I thought they just wanted to be involved. I thought a lot of things. The night everything shifted, it started with something stupid, just a dinner. Her family hosts one of these big, semi-formal gatherings every couple of months. Her mom sets the table like it's a wedding reception, with those gold-rimmed plates and floral centerpieces that make the whole room smell like a perfume aisle. They always asked me to help with the setup, and I always said yes. Honestly, I didn't mind. I liked being part of something that felt warm. Even if half the time her cousins barely looked up from their phones and her uncles treated me like some stray her dad accidentally let in the house. I was pouring drinks in the kitchen, laughing to myself because her dad had just handed me this massive bottle and said, "Be generous with the pours. It's the only way to make it through one of these nights." I had just stepped out back to grab more ice from the cooler when I heard voices through the screen door. Her Uncle Paul, loud, always had something to say, was talking to someone inside. She could have done so much better. I mean, Jason's fine, but come on. He's just a temporary step. Then came my wife's voice. Steady. Cold. Not for long. Once the transfer's final, I'm gone, and I'm taking half his company with me. At first, I thought I misheard. I stood there, holding a bag of half-melted ice, feeling the blood drain from my face like someone had pulled a plug. I waited, hoping maybe she'd laugh. Say she was joking. Say something, anything, to make it not real. But she didn't. Just silence. Then the clinking of glasses and a shuffle as someone moved away from the door. I walked back and like nothing happened. Smiled. Served drinks. Chatted about the weather. I handed her cousin a glass of Chardonnay with a grin that probably looked a little too forced. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped a bottle of soda. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. That was the part that hit me the hardest. The way she kept acting like everything was fine, like I was too dumb or too trusting to catch on. I spent the rest of the evening on autopilot, smiling when someone made a joke, laughing too loudly when her dad told a story I'd already heard a dozen times. She touched my shoulder at one point. I almost flinched, but I didn't let it show. I just nodded, kissed her temple like always, and told her dinner was amazing. She beamed at me. That fake, polished beam she used when clients were around. That's when it clicked. Maybe it had always been fake. After everyone left, I did the dishes. I needed the distraction. She went upstairs to take a quick bath and asked if I could bring her phone charger. I said sure. I walked into our bedroom 10 minutes later and saw her phone, face up, lit with a new message from a contact saved under Marcy. It was a man. I knew it instantly. I didn't even have to read the whole thread, just the first few lines. Can't believe he still doesn't suspect. Just 2 more days and we're clear. I didn't touch her phone. I didn't say a word. I just left the charger on the nightstand like nothing happened. Then I went to the guest room, shut the door, and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. My heart didn't break, it boiled. The next morning, she kissed my cheek like usual, told me she had a meeting in the city and would be back late. I nodded, watched her walk out the door in that blazer she always wore when she wanted to impress someone. The moment she left, I got to work. Over the past 6 years, I'd quietly built safeguards into everything. Backups. Agreements. Even the shares in the company were structured in a way that gave me final say over any transfer, but she didn't know that. She thought she could slide in, cozy up to my business partners, and walk away with half the equity and a smug little grin. That morning, I called my lawyer, then my accountant, then my co-founders. I laid it all out, piece by piece. I expected them to be shocked, furious, but they weren't. They looked tired. One of them, Ryan, just sighed and said, "Honestly, man, we were waiting for you to see it." She's been playing the long game. That night, she came home humming. Literally humming. Walked in with a box of takeout like she didn't just got me 24 hours earlier. "You're not mad I was out so late, are you?" she asked, peeking into the living room with those wide, fake innocent eyes. "Of course not," I said. "I trust you." And I almost laughed at how smoothly the lie came out. The next 2 days passed like a slow-motion montage. She kept up appearances, called me babe, asked if I wanted to plan a trip for spring, even offered to cook. I said yes to everything. I played my part, smiled, nodded, agreed. Then the third morning hit. I was in my office when it started. My phone lit up, once, then again, then nonstop. Calls from her mom, from her uncle, from numbers I didn't recognize. Emails, texts, notifications, one right after the other. Her name popped up on my screen 6 times before I finally picked up. She was crying, screaming, "How could you? Jason, what did you do?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That's when I heard the knock at the front door. Heavy, rapid, then another, and another. The world was finally catching up to her. I didn't answer the door right away. I let the knocking continue until it turned into pounding, like whoever was out there was afraid I'd vanish if they didn't break the door down. But I wasn't going anywhere. I wanted her to wait. I wanted her to sit in that silence and wonder, because for the first time, I wasn't the one scrambling to keep the peace. I was the one holding the cards. Eventually, I walked to the door, slowly, like I had all the time in the world. When I opened it, I found her standing there in yesterday's clothes, makeup smudged, hair tangled. She looked like she hadn't slept. Good. Her uncle was behind her, red-faced and seething like someone had just insulted his entire bloodline. "Jason," she started, her voice trembling. "Can we please talk?" I leaned against the doorframe and gave her the same polite, unreadable look she'd used on me for years. "Of course," I said. "Would you like to come in? Or are you just here to collect what's left?" Her uncle stepped forward, all bluster. "You've made a huge mistake, son. You're not thinking clearly. This is overreacting." I tilted my head. "Interesting. Because I'm pretty sure plotting to defraud your spouse and steal his company is the real overreaction. But hey, I'm not the legal expert." She stepped between us. "Jason, please. I didn't mean. Look, I wasn't going to go through with it, okay? It was just talk." I didn't even blink. Then I assume you won't mind if I send the audio to my lawyer. Her face went pale. Because here's what she didn't know. After that dinner, after I heard what she said out on the patio, I didn't just walk back in and play the part. I planted a small recording device in the living room the next day, just in case. And guess what? She did talk. She talked a lot. With her uncle, with her friend Marcy, with herself, even, muttering while checking her bank app, reading off numbers, talking about timelines and percentages and my company shares like she already owned them. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said then, tears sliding down her cheeks like they were supposed to wash everything clean. It got out of hand. I thought maybe I deserved something too. You did, I replied, and my voice was calm. Too calm, like the still water before a storm. You deserved honesty. You deserved respect. But you wanted control. You wanted power. So you faked love. You faked us. Her uncle tried again. You'll ruin her if you go public with this. Do you really want that on your conscience? I smiled, not out of joy, but because I finally understood something. These people didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a stepping stone, a transaction, a means to their comfort. And now that the latter was gone, they were panicking. I'm not going public, I said. That would be petty. I'm just protecting what's mine. Then I handed her a folder, neatly organized, labeled. Everything she'd tried to move, every bank detail, every piece of property with my name still attached, every sneaky little attempt to shift money into joint accounts and siphon it off, was there. And beside that folder was another. This one labeled, Notice of Separation. She opened it with shaking fingers. This isn't fair. You're just throwing everything away. I looked at her then, really looked at her. For the first time in a long time, I saw her clearly, not as the girl I fell in love with, not as the woman I married, but as the stranger she'd slowly become. No, I said, you threw it away. I'm just taking out the trash. She cried harder, begging now, swearing she'd change, that it was all a mistake. Her uncle watched with crossed arms, tight-lipped, probably calculating what this meant for his own finances, since he'd clearly tied some strings to her schemes. I didn't care. I told her I'd be staying at a hotel for a while. The house was still mine legally. I'd give her a few days to get her things and go. But if she touched anything that didn't belong to her, or if she even breathed near my business again, my lawyer would bury her in so much legal mud, she'd need a snorkel to breathe. She left eventually, still crying. Her uncle tried to slam the door on his way out. I didn't flinch. The next few days were quiet, unnervingly so. Her call stopped. The text slowed, then stopped entirely. She must have realized the damage was done, that there was nothing left to salvage. I thought that would be the end of it, until her mother called me. That call changed everything. She didn't ask how I was, didn't apologize, didn't even try to defend her daughter. Instead, she said, "You've made your point, Jason. Now be a man and fix this." I stared at the phone in disbelief, then let out a short, bitter laugh. Fix what exactly? Our family, she snapped. You think money means you can just walk away? That girl gave you 6 years of her life. She made you look good. You owe her. That's when something inside me broke, and not in a sad way. In a final way, like something that had been rusted shut for years had finally snapped open. Because she was right. My wife had made me look good, by pretending to love me, by smiling on cue, by saying all the right things while stabbing me in the back. And now, when it all came crashing down, her family thought I owed them. I didn't respond. I just ended the call. Because it wasn't over. Not yet. It was strange how quickly the silence became comfortable. The first morning I woke up alone in the house again, truly alone. I expected to feel hollow. Or angry. Maybe both. But instead, I felt clear. Like my mind had been running underwater for months, maybe years, and I'd finally broken the surface. I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, looking out at the same yard where I'd once planned to build a deck for her dream garden. Funny, she never planted a single thing. Not even a tomato. But she talked about it a lot. Said it would be our project. Another thing on a long list of empty promises. It wasn't just the betrayal that got to me. It was the performance. The precision of it. How methodically she'd built the illusion. How naturally her family had joined the cast, like this had been the plan all along. And maybe it had. That thought sat with me longer than I expected. I went to the office that afternoon, have to escape the silence, have to ground myself in something that hadn't turned on me. My business partners, Ryan and Chris, greeted me with the cautious sympathy of two men who didn't want to say the wrong thing but needed me to know they had my back. Chris, ever the quiet one, just clapped my shoulder and said, "Whatever you need." Ryan pulled me aside. "She called me, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "When?" "Yesterday. She said she wanted to clear the air. Said she was worried you'd do something extreme." I scoffed. Extreme would have been draining the accounts and flying to Costa Rica. I'm not interested in revenge for the sake of it. Ryan nodded, but he looked uncomfortable. She also asked if we could reconsider the share agreement. That stopped me. She what? She asked if there was any chance we could undo the share lock you put in last quarter. Said it was unfair. Said you'd manipulated her. I laughed, low and dry. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. The moment her first plan failed, she pivoted. No apology. No ownership. Just a new angle. A new manipulation. Her favorite game. She forgets, I said quietly, that she never helped build this place. She just decorated it. Ryan didn't say anything to that. He didn't need to. Later that evening, I got a text from her. No words, just a photo of the guest room, packed with her luggage. A single line followed. "I'm out. I left your key on the counter. Hope you're happy." There was no punctuation. No goodbye. No real closure. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Not because it hurt, but because of what it didn't say. No remorse. No acknowledgement. No, "I'm sorry I betrayed you." Just another half-played attempt at guilt. Another unfinished performance. I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself a drink, something dark and expensive I'd been saving for a celebration. I figured freedom qualified. That night, I started combing through everything she'd touched. Every email, every account, every file. I made copies, screenshots, backups. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. Because people like her don't just disappear. They pivot. They resurface. And when they do, they come back with lawyers. And sure enough, a week later, I got a notice in the mail. She was contesting the separation agreement. She claimed coercion, emotional manipulation. She said I controlled the finances and isolated her from family decisions. I almost laughed. She'd never let me pick the color of the curtains without consulting her mother. But this wasn't about truth. It was about pressure. It was about painting herself as the victim before the full story could come out. Because if she controlled the narrative, she could still win. That's when I made the decision. I called my lawyer and told him to greenlight the release of the evidence. The recordings. The emails. The photos. All of it. But not to the public. Not yet. Just to her attorney. Let them hear what I heard on that patio. Let them read the messages. Let them see the transfer attempts. Let them decide if they really wanted to drag this into court. I figured it would buy silence. Instead, it bought something better. Panic. The next morning, I got a call not from her, not from her lawyer, but from her mother. Again. This time, her voice was shaky. Not angry. Not smug. Just small. "Jason, sweetheart," she said, in that careful tone people use when they think they're being clever, "I think we've all let this get a bit out of hand. Don't you?" I didn't say anything. She continued, a bit faster now. "Your wife, she's very upset. I think she regrets everything. And we all know how hard it can be when emotions are high. Maybe you could come over. We could talk this through. As a family." Family. That word. Again. I almost said yes. Almost. But then I remembered the way her daughter looked me in the eye the night she promised forever, while already drafting a plan to steal what I built. I remembered the way her uncle laughed on that patio. The way her mother sat across from me all these years, pretending she didn't see the cracks she helped create. So instead, I said, "You should tell your daughter to sign the paperwork." A pause. Then, brittle silence. "And if she doesn't?" her mother asked. I smiled. "Then I'll show the world who she really is." And that's where it stands. For now. Because what I haven't told them, what they don't know, is that the recordings aren't the only card I'm holding. There's more. Things they really don't want to see the light of day. Financial things. Legal things. Things that would make every bridge they've ever leaned on burn to ash. But I haven't decided yet. Because I want them to sweat. I waited exactly 3 days after that phone call. 3 days of silence from her, her mother, the lawyers. No updates. No threats. Not even the fake friendly check-ins they'd been using to try and butter me up. I knew exactly what that meant. They were scrambling. Probably trying to dig up dirt on me, or twist some narrative to make me look like the villain. It was too quiet, too still. Like the pause before an earthquake. I spent those 3 days preparing. I wasn't angry anymore. That part had burned out. What I felt now was focus. Cold, steady focus. Because it was no longer about heartbreak. It was about dignity. And making sure she didn't get to rewrite the story of our life into some tragic tale of how she was mistreated and misunderstood. She wanted a clean exit. One where I handed over half of everything I'd built and walked away looking like the bitter ex-husband. She almost got it, too. If I hadn't stepped out to get ice that night, if I'd just poured the drinks a minute slower, I might have smiled through the entire dinner, toasted to our future, and handed her the keys to my kingdom. But life has a way of protecting those who pay attention. And I was finally paying attention. On the fourth morning, I met with my lawyer one last time. We finalized everything. All the documents. All the evidence. And most importantly, the counter-motion. One that would not only dissolve her claims to my company, but leave her financially exposed for attempted fraud. We didn't use that word lightly. We had proof. Wire transfer requests, audio admissions, shared plans with third parties. Her friend, Marcy, had even unknowingly helped us. She'd sent messages referencing the timeline, the plan, the payout. My lawyer asked, "You sure you want to go through with this? Once this is filed, it's not just going to be about money. It's going to get public. Ugly." I looked him in the eye. Good. Let them all see. And so we filed. The news didn't take long to reach her. Within hours, I got a text. Just 2 words, "You monster." I didn't reply. An hour later, another. "You said you wouldn't go public. You promised." I hadn't. I never promised anything. I had only said I wouldn't initially. But things change when someone decides to torch your life and expects you to hand them a fire extinguisher. The next day, her attorney called mine. There was panic in his voice. They didn't want this in court. They didn't want it in the papers. They didn't want it anywhere. Apparently, her mother was already getting calls from her country club friends. Rumors had started swirling. Someone had leaked the phrase, "attempted corporate fraud within marriage." I never said a word to the press. But funny thing about lawyers, sometimes they talk when they think it'll help their client. Suddenly, they were willing to settle. They offered to drop all claims. She'd give up any rights to the business. She'd leave the house. She'd sign the NDA. No fuss, no fight. But it was too late. So I said no. I countered with something stronger. "You will publicly retract your statements. You will apologize in writing. And you will return every cent you funneled into that hidden account." Her lawyer pushed back, said it was excessive. I sent over the recording of her uncle discussing, pulling a fast one before the fool figures it out. They caved within a day. I met her for the last time at a neutral conference room downtown. No lawyers present. Just us, a mediator, and a thick folder of documents on the table between us. She looked different, tired, older. Not physically, but in the way people look when they've spent too long lying to themselves. Her voice was small when she spoke. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I said nothing. I thought if I just had some control, I'd feel safe. You always had everything. The respect, the business, the friends. You had me, I said. My voice didn't shake. You just didn't want me. You wanted what I came with. She stared at her hands, her fingers picking at a hangnail until it bled. "I was scared," she whispered. "I didn't think you'd ever leave. I thought I'd be stuck." That's what broke me, not out of sympathy, but clarity. She had been stuck, not with me, but in her own bitterness. Her jealousy. She'd let it rot her from the inside out. And when she couldn't build her own thing, she tried to steal mine. We signed the papers. No hugs, no tears, just ink and silence. She took one last look at me before she walked out. "I hope you find someone who sees you for you," she said. I watched her go. Then I slid the folder into my briefcase, stood up, and walked out into the sunlight. It wasn't over, though, because she'd still done damage. Not just to me, but to my reputation. Some people had heard her side first, had believed it. So I made one last move, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. I wrote a statement, not a press release, not a tell-all, just a clear, firm message. In light of recent events involving my separation, I want to clarify that any claims made against my integrity or business practices are categorically false. Evidence has been reviewed by legal professionals, and formal agreements have been reached. I believe in transparency, respect, and accountability, and I will continue to uphold those values in my personal and professional life. It went out to investors, partners, clients. The support I got back was overwhelming. People who had been quiet before started reaching out, sharing their own stories, apologizing for doubting me, standing by me. It didn't fix everything overnight, but it planted something again, trust. The kind I could build on. The house is mine now. Empty, yes, but it feels cleaner. Like the walls themselves are finally breathing again. The company is doing better than ever. Ryan and Chris promoted me to CEO, not because of the drama, but because I'd proven I could weather a storm. And as for her, last I heard, she moved in with her mother. She tried to start a consulting business, but couldn't get clients. People talk, especially when there are receipts. I didn't destroy her. I didn't have to. I just showed the world who she really was. And then I let her fall, not out of malice, but because some people only learn when the floor they thought would always be there finally gives out beneath them. So no, I didn't get the love story I thought I was living in. But I got something better. I got out, with my name intact, with my business stronger, with my future mine again. And I'll take that ending, quiet, clean, earned, over any fairy tale. Any day.